Chapter 149. Dake wasn't very good at rejecting people. Plus, he was interested in this, so he followed the shop assistant into the secret room again. This time, the room was clearly tidied up. The semi-finished products that were only used to test the reaction had been returned to the factory for repair. Only a few finished products were still here. The most eye-catching one was still the goldfish that seemed to come from the underworld. However, beside the snapdragon grass, there was a super cute creature that instantly attracted all of Dark's attention. Is this a fennec fox? Dake was very surprised. The shop assistant saw that the reaction was good and said proudly, "That's right, this is a type of fox grass, fennec fox grass." Fennec foxes could be said to be one of the smallest canines on Earth. They formed a pair of especially cute big ears over a long period of natural selection. Their fur was milky white to light yellow. Remember, https://m. VIP can't you? VIP. The end of the tail was usually black. The fennec fox in front of him could be said to be a very standard type, but its petite size was comparable to the kittens in Dake's dormitory. Dake took a liking to it at first sight. Bliss and Fox were originally very compatible. Maybe if he was lucky he could refine a dodgy or something. Dake thought about Peaches and asked, "How much is this pot of fox grass worth?" The shop assistant said, Fox grass hasn't been mass-produced yet, so the price is slightly higher. A pot is at least 100 credits. Dake, okay. Do you need special cat juice for this pot of fox grass? The shop assistant, that's not necessary, just use the same kind of cat juice as the normal cat grass. Not long after, Dark left the kitty grass flower shop with the fox grass in his arms. Then he strolled around the street for a while, and bought all the things he needed for the fox grass. With this pot of fox grass, he felt that his research was going to have a big breakthrough. Previously, he was still hesitating whether to continue cultivating the fruit of bliss, or to store the bliss to develop the fruit of bliss. Now he didn't have to think about it at all. The number of bliss points needed for the fruit of bliss was not fixed yet, and the new pot of fox grass was already in his hands. There was no need to hesitate. Dake was not in a hurry to cultivate the fruit of bliss. After he returned to his dorm, he planned to use 1 or 2 days to cultivate a relationship with the fox grass. Anyway, there was another sleeping basket beside his bed, until Saturday night. Only then did he pick up the dropper and use the dragonfly dripping technique again to extract the bliss that had overflowed from the brain. In this way, the 5 points of bliss from last month, the 5 points of bliss from yesterday, and the 5 points of bliss from today, added up to a total of 8 points. At this time, the index of bliss had changed from 109 to 106, which was considered to be within the safe range. Next, he didn't want to take the risk to level up bliss. Instead, he wanted to lower pride. However, that was something to be considered later. After absorbing enough bliss, Dake locked the cat plant in the bedroom, and only brought the fox plant to the balcony. He then opened the gate of the insect tree and injected 1/3 of today's bliss into one of the branches. Thus, one of the branches on the insect tree stored 3 points of bliss, and 2 of them stored 2 points of bliss, respectively. Dake picked up the fox plant so that it could absorb the branches. The effect was immediate. It didn't change because of the change of seasons. The bliss emblem appeared on top of the fox plant's head. Then it sprouted and grew into a bud. It bloomed under the moonlight and finally bore fruit. It was a fruit that was rich in bliss. Then Dake injected the remaining 1 point of bliss into the branches and continued to store it. He didn't forget to close the gate and carried the fox plant back to the bedroom. As the weather was getting colder, Dake had already moved the fox plant's hut to a corner of the bedroom. Now the 3 cat plants were living indoors. The cow plant was quiet, the cat plant was active, and the fox plant was unusually clingy. Dake placed the fox plant in the sleeping basket and began the experiment. He was already familiar with the steps of the experiment. First he summoned Kettle. Then he placed the fruit of bliss into Kettle's shell and waited for the fruit to dissolve and ferment. The fermentation time was about half an hour. After half an hour, he would obtain a cup of juice from the fruit of bliss. Next, he would use the basic refining method bird and beast species normal to refine it. He used a blank magic card with 50 credits. The core material was the fruit of bliss. As for the final result of the refining, it was completely up to fate. This was a refinement without any guidance. Even the element selection of the refining method could be used to refine other elements of the normal element. This made the randomness of the experiment even greater. It also made the possibility of the experiment failing even higher. However, Dake always had a strong sense of luck when refining magic elven cards. The entire process of the experiment was unusually smooth. Even after activating the number 1 refining array, because the juice from the fruit of bliss alone wasn't enough to complete the refining, he could solve it at the last moment by adding additional materials. In addition to the fruit of bliss, Dake also added the entushing potion that he obtained from Sister Kalien. Grim potion and entushing potion, one was against illusions, and the other was against brainwashing. In the beginning, Dake chose the entushing potion that could remove most of the curses that involved the brain and mind manipulation spells. Originally, he wanted to refine the entushing potion into a magic potion card, but with the accumulation of knowledge he realized that with his current level, it was impossible to refine such a high-level magic potion into a card, so he put it aside until now. In the end, when he put in the materials, he poured all 3 tubes of entushing potion in one go. After that, the light of the number 1 refining array reached its peak, and the production of the magic elven card successfully advanced to the final step of smelting. The magic elven card turned into a light cocoon. Dake reached out and touched it lightly, continuously pouring magic into the light cocoon. It was somewhat similar to when he made the milk can. The magic in the light cocoon was constantly fluctuating, and all kinds of materials were continuously smelted. It took about 5 minutes before it stabilized. At this time, Dake's anticipation for this magic elven card had reached its peak. He really wanted to know what kind of magic elven card would be refined in the end without deliberate guidance. Thus, he quickly took a mercury knife and carefully cut the entire light cocoon. What shot out from the slit was a dreamy pink color. It was the color of bliss, and also the color of fairies. Dake was slightly dazed. He was fascinated. Chapter 150. Entushing potion's core ingredient was the fairy's flower, just as the green potion's core ingredient was the hallucinatory grass. Hallucinatory grass could cause hallucinations, while the green potion extracted from the hallucinatory grass could resist psychic illusions. The fragrance of the fairy's flower could seep into the brain and cause people to lose their minds. Entushing potion with the fairy's flower as its core could dispel brainwashing spells. Furthermore, this magic guide fairy, which was refined using the Anderson potion as the core material, had a powerful charm. The charm was very mild. In the blink of an eye, Dark was able to break free from the slightly bewitching feeling. He wiped the card surface and immediately saw the magic elf on the card surface. It was a cute elf with pink and white ribbons wrapped around it. The edge of the magic elf card released a faint orange glow. It was an orange card. Website: https://m vipcanchu VIP. Card name: Fairy Ibu. Type: Elf card. Race: Bird/Beast. Attribute: Fairy. Magic power: 1900. Attack: 1700. Defense: 1300. Ultimate skills: Mesmerizing body, Mesmerizing voice, Moon force. Top tier magic power, powerful attack, and not weak defense formed the 3 dimensions of this orange grade magic elf card. Among the 3 ultimate skills, Mesmerizing body originated from Fairy Ibu's special ability and was also the ultimate skill of this magic elf card. Mesmerizing body, sometimes mesmerizing the opposite sex who comes into contact with it. As for the second ultimate skill, Mesmerizing voice, it could change the activation condition of mesmerizing body from contact to hearing, a psychic ultimate skill. Mesmerizing voice, emit a mesmerizing cry and inflict mental damage to the opponent. Under the premise of having mesmerizing body, sometimes mesmerizing the opposite sex who hears the mesmerizing voice. As for the third ultimate skill, Moon force, it was Fairy Ibu's strongest attack, and like Moon Ibu's moonlight, it was a symbol of bliss. Moon force, Borrow the power of the moon to attack the opponent. Under the moonlight, the power is doubled. As the skill information flowed into his brain, Dake began to recite the incantation for normal summoning. Magic summoning. In the faint pink light, a pink fairy waving its ribbon-like antennae appeared. Fairy Ibu. Fairy Eevee was one of Eevee's evolved forms, and one of the main requirements for evolution was intimacy. Its body was mainly white, its head, ears, and the lower part of its legs were pink, the inner part of its ears, blue eyes, and light blue eyes. There was a bow on its left ear and on its neck. There were 2 ribbons on the bow, which were actually its antennae. Fairy Ibu liked to wrap his ribbon antennae around the arms of his beloved master, as if he was holding the arms of his lover. Meet Heartsuit Fairy Ibu ants Dake's Ibu's ribbons, wrapped Dake's face. And Dake, Ibu Dake Bliss and Dake's, and Dake. The S was more passionate than a milk can. Dake could only rely on his master's dignity to command it to let go. Fairy Ibu slowly let go of the ribbon, showing an aggrieved expression. Dake had no choice but to use his secret skill, Eagle's Hand, to make it so comfortable that it forgot to complain. Dake then conducted a small-scale experiment with his sure-kill skill, Moon Force. He then summoned Fantasy Beast, Ibu, and after using Bliss 3, to evolve it into Moon Ibu, he used the sure-kill skill, Moonlight, to compare. Dake keenly perceived the slight differences between the two. After that, he was sure that if he used his Bliss to create a new Bliss 3, there was a chance that Illusory Beast, Eva, would evolve into Illusory Beast, Eva the Fairy. The same Bliss 3 would produce slightly different results because of the slight difference in nature. But if he wanted to verify it, he would have to make a new Bliss 3. But that's true. Since Bliss 3 isn't easy to make for now, I can always make another Bliss 3. After all, you can never have too many of these cards. Moreover, Moon Ibu or Black Diru Beast evolved from the goddess version of Bliss 3 aren't obedient. I really do need a Bliss 3 of my own. And so he had a plan for this month's great sin. After cuddling for half an hour, Dake had no choice but to put Fairy Ibu back into the card. This was where the inconvenience of the Magic Guide Fairy lay. Especially in a situation where his Magic Guide Fairy's intelligence level was above 3, it wasn't so suitable to keep it sealed in a Magic Guide card. Moreover, he also wanted to try the Spirit Summoning spell, and use fetters to make the Magic Guide Fairy respond to his summons in the card to further shorten the summoning time. In the past, the Spirit Magisters were able to forcefully shorten the summoning time of a 4-star Magic Guide Fairy card from the shortest of 1 minute to an exaggeration of 10 seconds. This allowed them to quickly summon second-tier Magic Guide Fairies without the need for sacrificial summoning. The most typical example was actually right beside him. The Sage of the Beasts, Claire Kyle, could do this. And to cultivate fetters, the most basic requirement was naturally to live together with the Magic Guide Fairy. This required a venue card similar to Zoo. There were many effects of venue cards, and Zoo and Animal Kingdom were quite special among them. Apart from their own effects, they could also allow Magic Guide Fairies of birds and beasts to exist in the venue for a long time. The Magisters only needed to continuously supply magic to maintain the existence of Zoo. Therefore, Dake had a sneak peek at Zoo. He didn't dare to think about the large-scale venue card, Animal Kingdom, but he could still give the small-scale Zoo a try. Of course, the prerequisite was that the creator of the venue card was willing to teach him everything. Dake felt that with his relationship with Claire, it shouldn't be difficult to achieve this. Although this kind of tactical core Magic Guide card was as precious as his life to the Magisters. Let's try to beg. Muster up your courage, Dake. On Sunday, Dake consulted Professor Li, then went to Traveler's Street to buy a gift for Claire. After dinner, he brought the gift to Claire's teacher's dormitory. Claire had been in Xingmalian for more than half a month, but Dake had never visited. Even today, he came with a purpose, which made him feel a little ashamed. Chapter 151. Knock, knock, knock. When someone knocked on the door, Claire was reading the Vampire Diaries on the narrow balcony. It was a wartime book about the sadomasochistic love between a young girl and a vampire. Other than the cliché plot of falling in love with the enemy, The novel itself analyzed the characteristics and habits of vampires from the perspective of a young girl. It had a certain degree of academic value. She was so engrossed in it that she didn't hear Dake's knocking sound. Knock, knock, knock. After 3 more knocks, Dake put down his hand and sighed. Looks like Claire didn't release her animal tonight. Remember the website, VIP, can't you? VIP. If it was someone else, they would most likely think that Claire wasn't in the dormitory. But Dake knew very well that closing the door was too normal for Claire. If she released her animals, then the person who opened the door would be the lazy lion that liked to lie by the door. But there were policies and countermeasures. Dake quickly summoned the little demon and let it go around the long corridor. It flew from the outside of the castle to the balcony of the teacher's dormitory. Sure enough, the little demon saw Claire curled up on the recliner on the balcony. Then it raised its paw and knocked on the glass window. Clap, clap, clap. Claire finally raised her head. Isn't this Dake's familiar? Her heart moved slightly, and she glanced at the door. A meerkat appeared from the light. It flew to the door and opened it. Dake pushed the door in, patted the meerkat's head, and closed the door. The teacher's dormitory was obviously different from the students' dormitory. Although the students' dormitory was spacious, it only had 1 room, 1 toilet, and 1 balcony. The teacher's dormitory had 3 rooms and 1 living room. It was excessively spacious. The dormitory was very clean, and there was a faint fragrance floating in the air. Of course, Claire couldn't have organized it. Claire had become less diligent since the war. Fortunately, she had a bunch of animals that could take care of her daily life. Dake glanced around and said, "Professor, is Professor Kate here?" Claire opened the door from the bedroom. She was wearing loose pajamas that were a size too big, revealing a crystal clear shoulder. She was holding a book. Her expression was relaxed, and her eyes were sleepy. I'm here. Ha. He yawned. Dake glanced at her and placed the gift on the table. Claire's eyes lit up, and she strode over. Fairy wine? How did you get this? Dake looked at Claire, who had no manners, and was slightly relieved. After all, they hadn't seen each other for many years. In the past half a month, Claire had been busy adapting to her job and hadn't had much contact with him. But now, it seemed that Claire was no different from before. As the memories surfaced in his mind, Dake's actions became more natural. He sat down on the sofa and complained. I found it in a tavern on Travelers Street. Thanks to Professor Li's letter of introduction, the owner of the tavern was willing to take it out. Of course, the fairy wine is only sold to fairies. The fairy wine I drank last time was given to me by Peter. Claire put the Vampire Diaries on the table and picked up the goblin wine to read it carefully. The wine was blurry and emitted a dreamy color. Wait. After saying that, she ran to the kitchen and took 2 wine glasses. She opened the bottle and poured the wine in one go. As the wine flowed into the wine glasses, a faint aroma of wine was emitted. The fairy wine didn't contain alcohol, but it could evoke a person's chaotic thoughts. It was a typical case of intoxicating oneself rather than the wine. After pouring the wine, Claire sat down casually beside Dake, her round arc sinking into the sofa. Why did you suddenly think of your Aunt Claire today? She picked up the wine glass and glanced at the blonde youth. Dake picked up his glass of wine, observed, sniffed, and sipped it. The legendary fairy wine. Only those who were close to fairies could taste it. The closer they were, the more fragrant the wine was. After it entered his throat, the more delicious it was. He closed his eyes and savored it for a long time. His thoughts were chaotic, and he recalled the bitterness and the sweetness. When he opened his eyes, he realized Claire's question again. I want to learn how to refine zoo. But Claire was just asking casually, and the aroma of the wine had already blurred her mind. Everyone was made up of countless fragments called the past. Happiness, anger, sorrow, joy, sorrow, bitterness, and sorrow. It was dyed with color like paint. A glass of wine went down her stomach. Claire was forced to recall the past. The sweeter the memory, the more bitter it was when she recalled it now. But only bitter memories could be engraved in her heart. Claire paused for a moment and looked at Dake beside her. She found that Dake was in a daze and was actually a little drunk. It seems that his relationship with that little fairy is really very close. Claire continued to pour herself a glass of wine. When Peter shared the fairy wine with her, she only tasted the sweetness of youth and the infiltration of literature. How could there be such a myriad of thoughts now? The more complicated the human heart was, the more things were hidden in the heart, the stronger the effect of the fairy wine was. The more she drank, the more drunk she was. Even the secrets that were firmly locked in the depths of her heart would be revealed. She didn't know. Dake was even more drunk. After a glass of wine, he was already drunk. This was perhaps something that Dake himself didn't expect. 2 glasses of wine went down her stomach. Claire had already reached her limit. She looked at the remaining wine at the bottom of the bottle, and simply poured it all out. Then she drank it all in one gulp. After that, she was dead drunk. A strange shade of red appeared on her cheeks. She looked at the blonde youth like a hungry carnivore. The youth turned into a cat in her eyes. She pounced on him like a lion. The big cat pressed down on the small cat and rolled on the thick plush carpet. The moon was very full. Dake had a dream. In the dream, he became a cat, sandwiched between Aunt Claire and Yalvette, struggling to survive. 4:00 in the morning. A trace of white appeared on the horizon. Dake, who felt unprecedentedly suffocated, suddenly opened his eyes. The snow white that filled his vision, the fragrance that wrapped around the tip of his nose, and the coldness that touched his lips made his face turn red. Bliss +1, bliss +1, bliss +1. After 3 consecutive jumps, he suddenly raised his head and panted heavily. Fortunately, he wasn't turned into a cat. It seemed that Aunt Claire still had some sense of propriety, and didn't continue to prank him after he grew up. With this thought in mind, Dake carefully broke away from Claire's embrace, and then found that the 2 of them had fallen asleep on the carpet. He sat up and rubbed his still dizzy head. The fairy wine, I didn't expect that I couldn't even withstand a glass. It seems that I can't tolerate alcohol in this life. I should drink less in the future. Chapter 152. Dake carried Claire and moved her to the sofa. Then he took off the small blanket on the back of the sofa and covered her stomach. The physique of a high-level mage wasn't as weak as it looked. Although they didn't necessarily train, they would concoct magic potions to strengthen themselves slightly in order to adapt to the fighting on the battlefield. Claire was a hero on the battlefield. Naturally, she wouldn't get cold easily because of the low temperature in winter. But everyone liked to be taken care of by someone close to them. The corner of Claire's mouth trembled slightly. Of course, she couldn't have not noticed such a big movement from the carpet to the sofa. She just didn't want to open her eyes. Hey, I think I'm here to ask about the refining method of zoo, right? Looks like I won't be able to do it for now. Dake propped his chin on his hand and watched for a long time. He felt that Claire might not wake up anytime soon. So he prepared to leave first. Remember, https://m, VIP can't you? VIP. A new week had begun. There were still classes in the morning. I'll come back at night. Dake patted his cheeks one last time and walked out of Claire's dorm. When the door closed, Claire quietly opened her eyes. Then, she stretched out her hands and hugged the air in front of her. She whispered, "I seem to have grown a little bigger?" She had been traveling for the past few years, and had gained a lot of experience. She knew what was appropriate. So when she used the transformation spell on Dake, she deliberately shortened the transformation time. This way, when Dake woke up, he wouldn't realize that he had turned into a cat at all. As it turned out, it was very successful. Claire felt that she was indeed a sage. She leaned on the sofa and smiled lazily. "Do you want a zoo? That's fine. In the end, other than him, there's no one else to teach. As for God's son, let I worry about him." The tower of the noble house opened at 5 in the morning. When Dake left the teacher's dorm, it was only a little past 4. He tightened his collar and exhaled. He decided to take advantage of this rare opportunity to experience the scenery of the castle at 4 in the morning. But before that, there was something he needed to confirm. System, expand the indicator. Bliss, 107, but in reality, it should be 107. 5. The system statistics of the major crimes would remove the mantissa. It was already the 4th day of August. After 3 days of drawing, Bliss went from 109 to 104. 5, and with the addition of 3 points, it was now 107. 5. The bliss storage in the insect tree was 2. 5. If he were to draw 5 more times, he would be able to keep bliss at 100 points and obtain 10 points to craft bliss 3. But it's actually hard to maintain. Dake turned off the system indicator and slowly walked along the side aisle of the castle. The faint light that shone through the square window prevented the corridor from becoming pitch black. However, the bone-piercing cold wind also took advantage of this opportunity to enter. The winter wind was like needles, making people feel pain. The little devil beast flapped its wings and flew beside him, shivering from time to time. Dake wondered if he should also prepare a Christmas present for it. A hat or a scarf. Dake went to the window on the 3rd floor out of habit. Through the window, one could see the external bridge on the 2nd floor that led to the other side of the castle. Then he heard something which should not have been heard in the castle at 4 o'clock. It was the sound of frequent crisscrossing footsteps, and the sound of panic screams. And it was very familiar. He's really restless. Dake slightly focused and became slightly interested. But he didn't know that White and Luoboat had actually entered the secret passage on Friday night. Only when one really went deep into the secret passage would they discover that the space inside was many times larger than they imagined. The two of them had brought enough rations and stayed in the secret passage for 3 whole nights. They only managed to escape now. The golems deployed by the school were actually only on the periphery of the secret passage. The depths of the secret passage were intricate and complicated. Without a day or two, it was impossible to go deep. In theory, it was enough to deploy them on the periphery. But White had Taboo Love as a guide and knew the secret passage better than anyone else. Not only did they bypass the golem's patrol, but they also went deep into the secret passage on Saturday. At this time, the secret passage had returned to normal, with only a few traps left. It had been more than a month since they got the treasure map. White used the method of putting himself in other people's shoes and finally deciphered the scrawl on the treasure map. They followed the route on the treasure map and worked together to move forward, constantly overcoming obstacles. Sunday evening. After finishing their last dinner, the two made a final assault and finally found the place where Hero Brett God buried the treasure. It was a small secret room hidden in the wall of the secret passage that had no special features. White covered his palm with a layer of magic power, and finally used the exhaustive search method to touch all the nearby walls before he found the entrance to the secret room. When the wall slowly became transparent under the influence of magic power, White's heart was filled with ecstasy. He rushed in without hesitation and fell flat on his face. The floor of the secret room was as smooth as a mirror, reflecting a swollen face. Then, Luoboat carefully crept in, and was surprised by the layout of the secret room. The whole secret room turned out to be made of mirrors. At first glance, it seemed that countless reflections of himself were looking at himself in the mirrors. This is the place where the hero hid his treasure. Where is the treasure? Luoboat tried hard to open his eyes, but the secret room was so small that he could see everything at a glance. There were only mirrors in the room. There was not even a speck of dust. Not to mention the treasure chest. Ouch, ouch, ouch. White got up while crying in pain. The floor was too slippery, so he simply sat on the ground, also at a loss. It took more than a month. He put down the magic chess. He put aside his schoolwork. He explored the secret passage whenever he had time at night. Finally, he found the place described on the treasure map this weekend. But it turned out to be this damn place? Where was the treasure? Where was the treasure? Where was the treasure? White was completely dumbfounded. He searched the whole secret room and tried to inject magic power into every mirror, but none of them responded. Hey, White, this isn't a joke by the hero, is it? A few hours later, Luoboat said in despair. White stared with bloodshot eyes and refuted subconsciously. That's impossible. My father left it to me. How could it be a joke? But as soon as he said that, he froze. It was because he suddenly realized that what Luoboat said was probably true. As expected, Luoboat continued. But you told me that it was a treasure left by the hero when he was a student. At that time, he definitely didn't know that he would have a son. White calmed down. Okay, I know. You're right. According to Principal Erdei's description, the hero was indeed a person who liked to joke. Luo Boat said reluctantly, "Maybe it's just that we didn't solve the riddle. Anyway, we found it, didn't we?" White said, "Yes, we found it." Luo Boat said, "We're still in the first grade. We still have a lot of time to solve the riddle." White said, "But the game is on Friday." Luo Boat. They stayed in the secret room for more than an hour and still found nothing. Chapter 153. White wished he could stay in the secret chamber for the rest of his life. But it was Monday at dawn, and they needed to go to class. So even if they didn't find anything, they still had to leave the secret chamber and return quickly. But on the way back, they were attacked. It was an uncountable number of black bats. The secret passage was suddenly illuminated, and the bats hanging upside down on the top of the passage swarmed up before the two could react. Luo Boat waved his arms desperately to drive away the bats. White held the magic card that he had just drawn and squatted down. The bat was flying towards them, and then it left as soon as it touched them, and then it suddenly disappeared. White summoned the troll out of inertia, but the bats didn't appear again until he recalled the troll. Website. https://m. VIP can't you? VIP. The two fled frantically under the pursuit of the bats, and finally escaped to the outer area of the secret passage with their legs numb. When they got there, the bats suddenly disappeared without a trace. But then they crashed into the patrolling area of the golems. There were many models of Shungmalian patrolling golems, and the two most numerous models were heavy cavalry and light cavalry. Heavy cavalry golems were 23 meters tall and 1 meter wide. They moved by rolling wheels and spider legs, and were specialized in defense. They moved relatively slowly, held a 2-meter-long lance, and were good at sweeping and stabbing. There was an enchanted gem on their foreheads that could release paralysis rays. Light cavalry golems were lighter. They also moved by rolling wheels and spider legs, but their spider legs were stronger and could stick to the wall. Light cavalry mainly used dual swords, and their waist axis could rotate 360 degrees. They moved relatively fast, but in fact, they weren't particularly fast. Unlike heavy cavalry, light cavalry didn't have long-range magic skills. As an alchemy product that was about to be eliminated, golems were rarely seen on the market. They mainly existed as guardians of ancient castles. Shungmalian golems were basically repaired by Professor Khazair alone, so there were often some functional problems. But this didn't prevent them from being enough of a deterrent to the little magisters. This was similar to how primary school students would instinctively be afraid of being discovered by their teachers when they violated school rules. After White and Luo Boat crashed into the golem's patrol area, they didn't even have the thought of resisting and fled in panic. The two of them used their familiarity with the secret passageway to avoid being surrounded from the front, but there were more and more magic statues chasing after them. When they finally rushed out of the secret passage, the two of them panted heavily, thinking that they could finally relax. However, he met the eyes of the patrolling golems in the castle. "Is this the scenery at 4 in the morning?" Dake slowly yawned as he watched White and Luo Boat escape onto the bridge while being chased by the golems. Another group of heavy cavalry appeared from the other side of the bridge and formed a blockade with the pursuing golems. They actually blocked the two people on the bridge. A normal daily life in the academy was turned into an adventure in an underground city by them. White and Luo Boat stood back to back, holding a stack of magic cards in their hands. Dake watched from upstairs without the slightest intention of intervening. When it came to things like being caught for violating school rules, one should be mentally prepared before deciding to violate the school rules. That was one's own responsibility. Dake himself was the same. He slowly turned around and looked at the other magic statue that had been attracted by the two people's movements. This magic statue wasn't a heavy cavalry or a light cavalry, but a dragon cavalry of a higher level. Non-certified unit detected. Non-certified unit detected. Arrest. Arrest. The enchanted gem on the magic statue's forehead flashed with scarlet light. It added a hint of eeriness to the dim early morning. Dake reached for his card bag. He had read the description of the Academy's magic statues. The structure of a dragon cavalry was more refined than that of a heavy cavalry and a light cavalry, and its functions were significantly improved. Its armor seemed thin, but it was even stronger than the heavy armor of a heavy cavalry. The metal skeleton that resembled a human's body was used as support, making the dragon cavalry more flexible. It was like a real human warrior, and the weapon in its hand was an edgeless greatsword that could swing out air currents, and the enchanted gem on its forehead could release a gravity ray. Upstairs and downstairs, inside the castle and on the bridge, at the same time, the curtains to the battle were drawn. Magic Guide Summon. X3. Although there was a slight difference in order, the three of them all summoned their magic guide sprites. Dake's magic beast Ibu, White's monster, Luo Boat's cyborg Ratman. The three magic guide sprites appeared one after another, causing the situation to change instantly. Dake didn't pay attention to the two people on the bridge anymore. After summoning Magic Beast Ibu, he immediately started running. Almost at the same time, the pitch-black light released from the dragon cavalry as forehead brushed past him. The air where Dake was originally standing clearly distorted. He only took a glance and immediately raised Bliss 3 high. The pink light that erupted from the card instantly broke through the darkness before dawn. Squeak squeak. The Bliss emblem appeared on Ibu-chan's forehead, and its entire form twisted and changed in the light. Magic Beast, Moon Ibu leaped out, and then, in the blink of an eye, it pounced on Dake Benki, F***CK. Although it was within his expectations, Dake still felt his head twitch. He continued running, the third magic guide card already in his hand. After the gravity ray missed, the dragon cavalry stomped on the ground and instantly exploded. The great sword that was wrapped in air currents drew a perfect arc and fiercely slashed at Moon Ibu. The built-in circuits of the golems would cause them to prioritize attacking the magic guide sprites. And as long as the students didn't resist, they wouldn't be harmed. But Dake clearly wasn't so obedient. The magic guide card in his hand shone brightly, propelling his body forward by 2 meters in an instant, completely missing Moon Ibu's position. Moon Ibu, who couldn't react in time, was struck from the side by the great sword and fiercely slammed into the wall amidst the violent air currents. Its magic value rapidly decreased, but after sliding down the wall, it let out a roar and finally turned its attention to the dragon cavalry. Shadow Ball. Seeing that Moon Ibu was finally able to fight, Dake immediately gave the command. Moon Ibu fiercely raised its head, the power of darkness quickly converging in its mouth, and in the blink of an eye, it shot out a pitch-black ball. Boom! The dragon cavalry reacted extremely quickly. The great sword that it swung actually scattered the shadow ball. Moon Ibu's forelimbs grabbed the ground, its body slightly crouched, revealing a look of vigilance. And at this moment, Dake had successfully opened up a safe distance. His eyes flashed, and the corners of his mouth lifted slightly. This was clearly the perfect opportunity to test out the magic guide card. Chapter 154. The operation mechanism of the Academy's golem determined that it would never abandon the magic elves to attack the students. Dake was very clear about this, which was also the main reason why he dared to use the golem to experiment with the magic card. Of course, if he hadn't bumped into it today, he wouldn't have taken this unnecessary risk. First, the obstruction curse. Moon Ibu growled. The evil aura released from its body brewed slightly, then suddenly exploded. Evil wave. The pitch-black aura swept through the surroundings like a storm, but the dragon knight brandished its great sword and charged forward like the wind. The airflow spurted from the greatsword broke through the aura. A triangular path was forcefully opened up in the large-scale evil fluctuation. Remember the URL. MVIP can't you? 6. It charged forward, like a sword saint. With a swing of its sword, the airflow swirled. Obstruction curse. At that moment, a brick-sized air wall appeared in front of the Dragon Knight's feet. The Dragon Knight, whose coordination wasn't that high, was actually tripped by this little trick. When it finally got up, Dake had a new magic card in his hand. Magic Bullet Curse. Dake injected magic into the card, and a fist-sized magic bullet quickly formed and shot out. Poof! The magic bullet exploded on the Dragon Knight's gauntlet, creating a magic flower. But it didn't even leave a scratch. The Dragon Knight's power level was obviously higher than the 4-star Moon Ibu, so it was natural that it wouldn't be damaged by the magic bullet curse. Dake wasn't discouraged by this. The Dragon Knight stood up again after falling, and the great sword in its hand slashed at Moon Ibu again. Moon Ibu's ferocious nature was aroused, and it pounced forward, grabbing the great sword before it could be swung. But then, it was sent flying by the airflow spurting out from the great sword. Moon Ibu had already used up a lot of magic. But under the illumination of the moonlight, its magic was gradually recovering. Looking at the moon, Ibu had already used up all his strength. Dake immediately took out the next magic card, and quickly chanted, "Sacrificial Summoning." With Illusory Beast, Moon Ibu as sacrifice, I summon Milk Jar. Even though this was the first time he had used the Moon Ibrahim as a sacrifice to summon him. However, after Illusory Beast, Ibu had evolved, the card surface had indeed become 4 stars. Summoning 4 stars with 4 stars fulfilled all the conditions of the sacrificial summoning technique. This was also a common technique used by Magi. The premise was that the lesser the number of offerings used, the higher the quality of the offerings. Sacrificing a single card to summon a high-quality magic card with a low-quality magic card would increase the probability of failure. Especially when the sacrifice was heavily injured, the chances of the summoning failing would increase exponentially. Even if the summoning was successful, there would be a phenomenon of insufficient magic power. Therefore, when a magus sacrificed a single card in exchange for a magic fairy, it was possible for them to make a comeback, or they could die instantly. Fortunately, Moon Ibu's mana was gradually restored to normal under the effects of moonlight. Dake's single card sacrifice didn't fail. As Illusory Beast, Moon Ibu disappeared. A new magic guide fairy replaced it in the castle. Moo Heartsuit, the cute pink cow, appeared with an excited cry. It sat on the ground and wagged its tail at a higher frequency. The sudden change in the magic fairy caused the Dragon Knight's thinking circuit to stagnate slightly. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Dake immediately commanded, "Big Milk Can, turn round." Upon receiving its master's command, the Big Milk Can immediately curled its body into a ball. A layer of metallic luster appeared on the surface of its skin, and its defense instantly increased by a level, from the initial 2,000 points to 3,000 points. At this moment, the Dragon Knight had regained its senses. It strode forward, holding its greatsword upside down, and ran towards the Big Milk Can. The airflow around the sword became stronger and stronger, as if it was accumulating power for a big move. Dake immediately roared, "Roll, Big Milk Can." "Moo." The milk jug responded, and its soft gaze instantly turned sharp. It fearlessly used Roll on the Dragon Knight. With the support of Round, the basic power of Roll doubled. Dake's eyes were bright as he watched the battle. The main purpose of this battle was to test the roll skill. After the Big Milk Can started rolling, its speed gradually increased, and its momentum continued to rise. But at the same time, it also meant that at the beginning of its rolling, before the speed was up, it was very easy to interrupt. But once the speed was up, it would be very difficult to stop. Facing the Big Milk Can that was like an iron ball crashing towards it, the Dragon Knight suddenly stopped, stood with its feet in the shape of an 8, and swung its greatsword horizontally. The airflow around the sword had already formed a storm, and the sound of a storm could be heard. If it was a small and light magic fairy like Kettle, it would probably be sent flying to some unknown corner just by being near it. Boom! The pink rolling ball broke through the barrier of the storm and collided with the greatsword. Ha! The Dragon Knight suddenly roared and tightened its stance. The strength in its arms burst forth, and it actually forcibly blocked the Big Milk Can's roll. Seeing that the Big Milk Can's rolling speed was getting slower and slower, the magic card in Dake's hand suddenly lit up. An additional push came. The short cooldown push incantation was used for the second time. The Big Milk Can was pushed forward fiercely for a distance, almost knocking the greatsword out of the Dragon Knight's hand. Then, after making a sharp turn, the Milk Can launched a second attack at the Dragon Knight. The second impact doubled the power. As it was rolling, Dake took out the Fade incantation. After a short interval, the big milk can's figure completely disappeared. The Dragon Knight's judgment circuit stagnated for a moment again. At this moment, it made a mistake in its dodging. The milk can ran over the left side of its body and knocked it back a few steps. Then came the third time. As the rolling speed became faster and faster, the power became stronger and stronger, and the difficulty of dodging also became higher and higher. The Dragon Knight could only use the greatsword as a shield to block in front of it. However, the huge sword was actually sent flying. The fourth roll. With the enhancement of rounding, the power of the rolling had increased by a full 16 times. The Dragon Knight could no longer block it, and the entire golem was sent flying. Bang! It crashed into the wall, and made a loud sound. There were obvious signs of falling apart all over its body. Stop Big Milk-Can. Dake issued an order. The Big Milk-Can braked and did not crush the Dragon Knight into pieces. The experiment was over. At the same time, the battle on the bridge had also come to an end. Chapter 155. The wind was blowing and the horse was laughing. On the bridge, White and Luoboat were trapped in the middle of the bridge, even though their respective magic elves had successfully attracted the attention of the golems. But they still couldn't find a chance to escape. In desperation, they could only hope that their magic elves could defeat the golems. But White's troll still had the power to fight against the heavy cavalry. Robert's Ratman cyborg, on the other hand, was cut in half at the waist by the light cavalier, with the rotating force of the waist axis. As the rat cyborg disappeared, Luoboat had no choice but to summon his fantasy beast, Castle. But it was still shattered by the light cavalry in one strike. What do we do? White. Luoboat screamed desperately in fear. But White wasn't much better off. The 3-star troll had barely lasted until now with its body advantage, but it was already covered in scars. Remember, https://m, vipcanshu, VIP Taboo Love, was useless against the golems. He was at his wit's end. His only hope. White couldn't help but raise his head. He could hear someone fighting on the 3rd floor of the castle. That might be a turning point. Dake didn't know that White was treating him as his last hope. He put away the card, went to the window and glanced down. He saw the heavy cavalry piercing through the troll, and the paralysis ray, shot from its forehead, hit White and Luoboat. GG. Dake mourned for them, and then left without looking back. The curfew was about to end. The sounds made during the battle with the golems were also likely to attract more uninvited guests. He didn't want to be locked up. 5 o'clock sharp. The curfew was over. Dake quickly passed through the front door of the aristocrat house's tower, and successfully returned to the dormitory. The battle just now made him a little tired. He lay on the bed for a while, and welcomed the dawn of a new day. By the time he came back to his senses, Dake was already sitting in the summoning class. He was studying while waiting for Professor Shi-Erfu to arrive. The professor was 5 minutes late, which was rare. Along with her, White and Luoboat came in through the back door with their heads down. Their expressions were extremely ugly. Professor Shi-Erfu mercilessly exposed the fact that the two had violated the school rules and publicly announced that they would be grounded until the day before Christmas. As for the destroyed dragon cavalry, he didn't mention it at all. During the previous interrogation, Luoboat shouted that there was another person who had also violated the school rules, but Professor Shi-Erfu simply ignored him. Records could be extracted even if the golem was damaged, but in reality, as long as they weren't caught by the golem, the professors would usually turn a blind eye. In principle, they encouraged students to break away from dogma and promote themselves. The first Monday in December. It was so exciting at the beginning. The matter of the brave duo being locked up became the topic of conversation among the first-year students during their leisure time. The only topics that were more topical than this were the intra-class competition on Friday and the dance party on Christmas Eve. The Halloween dance party wasn't enjoyable at all. The Christmas dance party was the romantic thing that couples yearned for. Sheng Malian had always had a saying. The success rate of confessing at the Christmas dance party was 1,415,926% higher than usual. Although there was no evidence to prove the origin of this saying, There were indeed more college couples who got together at Christmas than usual. Dake felt that there were two reasons for this. One was related to the atmosphere and the sense of ceremony, and the other was more realistic. People who could become dance partners more or less had feelings for each other. In other words, they had feelings for each other, which was why they were successful. Of course, the group atmosphere could also increase courage, making people who were usually shy and timid dare to express their feelings for each other. Teenagers actually didn't think too much. If they liked each other, they would confess. Then they would be rejected. Then they would become autistic. Many people didn't understand the weight of feelings. Monday's class ended quickly. At 3:30 in the afternoon, White and Luoboat packed up their books and went to the teaching room. Professor Shi-Erfu was a man of his word. Not only were they going to be confined, but they were also going to be deducted a lot of credits. They were already short on credits, and now they had even less credits. It's completely over. White's face was gloomy. He felt that the future was bleak. Luoboat was also faintly afraid. How will Professor Shi-Erfu punish us? White. Maybe she'll write an apology letter. Luoboat. Or maybe she'll clean the corridor. White. As long as it's not the toilet, Luoboat. I don't think so. Professor Shi-Erfu is surprisingly humane. She didn't extend the confinement until after Christmas. White. I think it's just because the holidays start right before Christmas. Luoboat. You're right. Outside the classroom, Dake watched the backs of the two people gradually disappear into the distance. He quietly cheered them on. Is this what happens when you get caught by the magic golems? Fortunately, I wasn't caught. He was a bit glad. He turned and walked in the other direction. That was the library. After finishing today's homework in the library, Dake ate first. Then he estimated that Claire should already be in the dormitory, so he went to visit her again. This time, Claire personally opened the door. She was still dressed very casually, and the dormitory was full of heating. Of course, it couldn't be because of the air conditioning. Professor, good evening. Dake walked into the dormitory and saw a red-skinned pig sleeping in the middle of the living room. This red-skinned pig was more than 2 meters tall when it was lying down. If it stood up, it would probably be taller than White's monster. Dake still remembered that its name was Henry. Claire gave each of the magic golems a name, but Dake didn't remember many of them. As for why he could remember Henry, of course, it was because this pig was simply an artifact of winter. The warm air it exhaled was a very comfortable kind of gas. It didn't make people feel dry, nor did it make people feel bored. In the winter when he was a child, Dake liked to lean on its stomach and read picture books. That was a rare moment when he was well behaved. Dark sat down on the sofa in the living room, and Claire brought out the cookies and hot milk that had been prepared earlier. Dake actually wanted to drink black tea, but of course he wouldn't say it out loud at this time. He picked up a cookie and took a bite. Sure enough, there was too much sugar in it. Claire always said that people who overused their brains needed sugar to cover up the fact that she was a sweet person. In short, it still tastes the same. She drank another mouthful of hot milk. Dake couldn't help but feel a trace of warmth. Claire, however, came back with 5 more books. These 5 books, each of them was more than 2 fingers thick. When stacked up, they were even taller. Claire pointed at the book and said casually, "You want to learn my zoo refining method?" Chapter 156. The meaning was obvious. Dake could almost imagine what she was going to say next. Sure enough, Claire said with a smirk, "Then you have to read these 5 books thoroughly first." With a bitter face, Dake took out a book and looked at it. The Sage of Beasts brings you into the magical world. Dancing with Beasts. Signed, Claire Kate. Dake's mouth twitched. Why are you pretending to be bitter? This is my famous book. Claire sat down beside Dake and added calmly, "It was published in the 4th grade. Dake! Exclamation point. Claire put another book on top of Dancing with Beasts and emphasized, "Venue cards are different from spell cards. You can't just try your luck by learning the magic language. You have to have a relatively complete basic understanding of what you are pursuing." Dake glanced at it. It was a book called The Secret Record of Birds and Beasts, Unknown Strange Ecology. As for the remaining 3 books, they were Advanced Magic Language, Resurrection Runes, Complete Solution to the Elements of Field Cards, and Circulation and Efficient Use of Magic. Claire said, "Knowledge can't be mastered overnight. You have to read these 5 books thoroughly first, then we can talk about the inheritance." Dake keenly caught the key words. Inheritance. Of course it's the inheritance. Claire rolled her eyes. Or do you want to freeload? Once you learn my things, you will be my person. The future development of the Sage of Beasts depends on you. Dake couldn't help but pout. To be honest, Claire was right. Dake's idea from the beginning was to freeload. As for the inheritance of the Sage of Beasts, he didn't have that intention at all. He wanted the zoo card not because he was interested in the Animal Series card set, but to cultivate fetters. Whether it was on the battlefield or in the arena, a faster summon could turn the tables. In short, it was the idea of a scumbag who wanted to eat meat but didn't want to take responsibility. But at this moment, of course, Dake couldn't expose his potential as a scumbag. He frowned and nodded bitterly. Claire suddenly came close to Dark, forehead to forehead, nose to nose, breathing heavily. She pinched Dark's face with both hands and pulled him away forcefully. Do you know how many people want to join my lineage? Are you not happy? Dake, of course. If she didn't want to, she would turn into a cat. The lineage of the Beast Sages was few in number, and Dake was fortunate enough to be the first successor, so he was very grateful. Next, he began his studies under the guidance of Claire. Claire mainly helped him to sort out the main context of the 5 books, but more importantly, she wanted him to learn by himself. Fortunately, Dake's mastery of the magic language had already reached a rudimentary level. Otherwise, he wouldn't even have been able to begin. Learning time was always short. In the blink of an eye, it was already 11 p.m. Because the content of the book was too difficult, even Dake felt sleepy. After 11 p.m., he took a bath in Claire's bathroom and enjoyed the high-class back scrubbing service of the bunny girl. Then, he fell asleep in the room that Claire had prepared in advance. In the dream, he dreamed that he turned into a cat again. Then he was locked in a narrow space full of soft cushions, and was constantly squeezed and squeezed. In the evening after that, Dake studied in Claire's dormitory almost every night. There were too many things for him to learn. In addition to the 5 books, there was still the knowledge about spell cage and fusion that he hadn't finished learning. Although the days were getting tighter and tighter, with Claire's help he solved many problems that he couldn't solve before. He also made great progress in the research of spell cage and fusion. Gradually, Claire's dormitory had his towel, toothbrush, water cup, change of clothes, and he also had the key to this dormitory. Time flew by like a white steed, passing by in the blink of an eye. It seemed that in the blink of an eye, it was already Friday's dual class. In the past week, Dake had a very fulfilling time, so much so that he even went to the library less. If it wasn't marked on the calendar, he almost forgot that there was such a competition. But most of the other first-year students were working hard in secret. Almost every afternoon to night, the laboratory and the library were full of first-year students. Dake's exclusive seat in the library was completely occupied by Deanna and Luosi. Aima always felt a little disappointed when she looked up and didn't see the back that always sat on her left. One day, the senior in charge of the library came to ask her about this. She pursed her lips and wanted to show her ventriloquism by saying, "Ah ah ah" to her. White and Luoboat continued their daily confinement after class. Their confinement time started at 4 p.m. and lasted until 11:30 p.m., before they were released back to the dormitory. The day of their confinement, they wrote a letter of remorse under the supervision of Professor Shierfu. The next day, on Tuesday night, they were ordered to clean the toilets. On Wednesday, they cleaned up the laboratory. On Thursday, they continued to clean the toilets. But other than that, the instructor, Ms. Gliss, would urge them to do homework and read books. Although it was forced, it was obviously better than letting them do as they pleased. Under the strict supervision of Ms. Gliss, White and Luoboat's grades improved slightly. Every night they were dog-tired. Furthermore, he had mastered the secret technique of falling asleep as soon as he lay down on the bed. It was also in the past few days. Among the wild bats that often appeared in the castle, There were some different individuals. They were cautious and only moved in the middle of the night. When they encountered an impassable place, they would turn into a black fog and squeeze in through the small gaps. The bats in the black fog moved slowly, but they could completely blend into the night and were extremely difficult to detect. They obviously had spiritual intelligence and only picked on students who were slow or tired. Moreover, they would leave as soon as they touched them. Their fangs released hormones that could numb a person's sense of pain. The bite on the neck would naturally heal after 10 minutes, leaving no traces behind. It was near the end of the semester. Although there were no exams, except for the first years, there were big projects to complete. The students became tired because of the busy schoolwork. The weakness after being sucked blood was also covered by the fatigue, and was difficult to detect. Friday's duel class was held in Battle Hall 1. Combat Hall 1 was larger than Dueling Hall 2, and its facilities were more complete. Before 8 p.m., the first years who had already received the notice had already arrived at the battle hall. Some people were eager to fight and were eager to give it a try. Some people were discouraged and wanted to escape. According to Professor Cheong-si, the results of this class competition were a summary of the results of the previous semester. It was clear at a glance. This made some of the weaker students tremble. Chapter 157. One Battle Hall. On the bench at the edge of the hall, Dake was counting his magic cards. Last night, he studied until midnight and didn't have time to count his cards. But he only had a few magic cards now, so he finished counting them quickly. Sprite card Sadface 1, Fantasy Beast, Ibu, 2, Trash Slime, 3, Kettle, 4, Dilu Beast, 5, Milken, 6, Fairy Ibu, remember the website, MVIP can't you? 6 magic cards Sadface 1, Happy Card, 2, Pride Eye 3, Pride 2 4, Bliss 3 5, Magic Bullet Spell, X2 6, Push Spell, 7, Obstacle Spell X2 8, Fade Spell, 9, Flicker Spell X2 Item Card Sadface 1, Energy Potion X5 2, Silence Potion 3, Reveal Powder X2. There were a total of 26 magic cards. It was enough to meet the minimum requirement to join the duel club. But the composition of the cards was obviously unreasonable. What was lacking the most were the first-tier sprite cards from 1 to 3 stars. As the first-tier sprite cards that could be summoned normally, Dake only had 3 of them. According to the rules of the competition, it would be difficult to draw them. So in order to not get stuck, Dake had to reduce the number of cards in the deck to a certain extent. Anyway, this competition doesn't have a limit on the number of magic cards. Let's try to filter them out. With a whiff of milk fragrance, Deanna came over. Dake, you already have so many magic cards? She covered her mouth and looked quite cute when she was surprised. Dake said casually, most of them are useless cards. Oh. Deanna also sorted out her magic cards. Dake glanced and found that Deanna also had a lot of cards. But when he wanted to take a closer look, Deanna blushed and turned around. She covered the cards and whispered, don't look, they are all useless cards. Dake was speechless. Deanna didn't know how to lie. If she said they were useless cards, then they were really useless cards. In the first semester of the first year, there were 3 types of magic card making methods that were taught in the classes. They were the Magic Beast Refining Method, Basic, Refining Method, and Universal Magic Spell Card Refining Method. Although Fantasy Beasts were magical, most of them were 1-star elf cards with 100 magic attack and defense. Moreover, the materials needed to refine the Fantasy Beast were actually very rare and difficult to buy. On the other hand, the refinement of general-purpose magic spell cards was limited by the magic spell. There were only 5 kinds, and the difficulty of refinement increased with each successive refinement. Among them, only the basic refining method was the simplest and most suitable. Therefore, if the little magisters wanted to increase their battle strength as quickly as possible, they could only gamble on the foundational refining method. If he was lucky, he could get 1 or 2 3-star cards. That would be a reversal of fortune. If one's luck was better, 1 or 2 3-star purple or orange cards would appear. That would be like a carp leaping through the dragon's gate. Some people like to call this behavior gambling cards. It meant that most people would lose everything equals. Deanna's credit limit was considered one of the best among the first-year students, so she had more than enough to spend a lot of credits on gambling cards. As a matter of fact, she had gambled a bunch of useless cards. The so-called useless cards usually referred to white cards that had pitifully low magic attack and defense under the same star level, and had no skills. However, Dake now wished that he had a few first-tier white cards that he could use to fill up his deck appropriately. He calmed himself down and continued to assemble the cards. First, 3 first-tier magic elf cards are necessary. Then 3 magic cards from the Great Sins series. With these 6 magic conducting cards as the foundation, add 3 third-tier magic conducting elven cards. After that, add 1 each of magic bullet spell, fade spell, energy potion, and reveal powder. The ratio of elf cards to magic and item cards is 6:7. Remove 1 more fade spell and 1 more reveal powder. That's it for now. If necessary, I'll adjust it later. Since there was no limit to the number of cards in a deck, there was no need to put in extra cards to fill up the deck. Even though the class competition this time was announced to be conducted according to the rules of a formal duel, with the number of cards that the first-year students had, it was still a part of the curriculum. Dake didn't take it to heart. The final deck was as follows: Frowny Face Fantasy Beast, Ibu, Trash Slime, Kettle, Diru Beast, Milk Jar, Fairy Ibu, Pride Eye, Pride 2, Bliss 3, Magic Bullet Spell, Energy Potion, Reveal Powder. There are 12 magic cards in total. The ratio of elf cards to the rest of the cards is 1:1. It should be enough. With that in mind, Dake stacked the rest of the cards into a deck and put them away. Ring ring ring. The class bell rang as scheduled. Let's go. Dake stood up from the bench. The rest of the students also began to gather in the center. Professor Cheong-si appeared at the entrance of the battle hall, with a relaxed look on her face. She pulled a trailer with one hand, with magic balls and other things in it. After entering the hall, Professor Cheong-si clapped her hands. 2 laps. Although the students sighed, they were already used to it. They mumbled and ran. Professor Cheong-si used this opportunity to start setting up. This time, the class competition directly used the equipment in the hall, so it was set up relatively quickly. After the students finished their 2 laps, the layout of the venue was more or less complete. There was a 5-minute break. Professor Cheong-si whistled, and the first-year students from the 4 schools gathered in front of her. I won't talk about anything else today. This competition will be conducted according to the official rules. The competition will be divided into 2 rounds. In the first round, each school will be divided into groups. Each group will have 4 contestants through a single elimination system. In the second round, there will be a total of 16 contestants using a double elimination system to determine the rankings. These 16 contestants will all receive a certain amount of academic credits as a reward. Professor Cheong-si briefly explained the rules of the competition, then clapped her hands. In addition, today's referee is. Now let's welcome the guests to the stage. Clang 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 clang. Then 3 expressionless professors walked in from the entrance of the battle hall. In order to cooperate with Professor Cheong-si's bad taste, they deliberately waited until now to appear. When they arrived in front of the students, their expressions softened. Professor Li yawned, as if he hadn't slept well. Professor Shi Erfa's expression was serious, and his eyes were sharp as he looked at the students. Professor Claire Kate's smile was gentle, like a spring breeze. In addition to Professor Cheong-si, there were exactly 4 schools. Under the arrangement of the professors, the students were separated. As the head of the aristocrat house, Professor Cheong-si naturally led the aristocrat house. The aristocrat house students, including Dake, followed Professor Cheong-si's footsteps to Field 1. The indoor battle hall was 30 by 20 meters, a little bigger than a basketball court. On both sides of the field, there was a contestant platform about 5 meters high. Duelists needed to use magic cards on the contestant platform to duel. Chapter 158. Field 1. Professor Cheong-si glanced at the children of the noble house and smirked. Among the 4 branches of the first years, the aristocratic house had the least number of people, with only 37. 37 was a prime number. It was actually quite troublesome to choose 4 people from these 37 people. So she decided to use a little trick. Dake Dimung stepped forward. Yes. Dake straightened his back and stepped forward, looking quite imposing. Professor Cheongsi nodded in satisfaction and said, "You don't have to participate in the first round for now." Dark, huh? I'll remember it in 1 second. Professor Cheongsi, as the defending champion, you have the right to advance to the second round. Dake. Oh. Although Dake was more willing to go on stage and experience the joy of a formal duel, Professor Cheongsi obviously wouldn't change his mind so easily. Although the students of the noble house were surprised, since the special authority was Dake Dimung, it wasn't that hard to accept. Even if some people were gnashing their teeth in jealousy, they didn't say anything. So Dake temporarily went from being a participant to being Professor Cheongsi's assistant. After the students had finished drawing their number cards, the competition, which would determine the results of the first-year students, began. The first match, number 1 versus number 2. The 2 contestants who drew their number cards had no choice but to climb onto the platform. From the platform that was 5 meters tall, looking down at the field, the area of 30 by 20 was already very large. It even gave people a feeling that they couldn't control it at all. But this was only the size of a normal competition. Large competition venues were all 120 by 80 in length and width. So high-level duels had corresponding requirements for the physical fitness of the duelists, especially in terms of vision. 3 months after school started, the little magisters were already very familiar with the rules of the official duel. The 2 contestants who climbed onto the platform followed the rules and placed their cards in the groove on the right-hand side of the card table. Then they poured magic into it. The magic projection mechanism was activated. A huge projection of the card table quickly unfolded in front of the platform. Place the magic ball in the field. Under Professor Cheongsi's instructions, Dake picked up the magic ball and walked towards the summoning area. There was a circular spot in the summoning area of the arena, which was specifically used to place the magic orb. The magic sphere's life barrier had 5 levels. Each level corresponded to 1,000, 2,000, 4,000, 8,000, and 16,000 mana points. The competition this time was on the same scale as the Rising Star tournament, so they used a level 1 life barrier. Dake inserted his thumb, index finger, and middle finger into the 3 holes of the magic orb, and injected a bit of mana to activate the life barrier. It was a transparent barrier made up of many hexahedrons. As the life barrier unfolded, the inside of the magic conducting orb lit up with glowing numbers that represented the mana value. Magic conducting balls were divided into red and blue, separated by the color of the glowing numbers. Dake placed the magic conducting ball about 1 meter above the circular point in the air. After sensing the strength of the life boundary, he quickly retreated. On the other side, Professor Cheongsi had also placed the other magic conducting ball. Observing the entire process from the perspective of the referee was a great help in further familiarizing himself with the rules of the game. Professor Cheongsi would also explain some details of the rules, which benefited Dake a lot. Because the strength of the cards of the first-year students wasn't high, the process of the game progressed very quickly. The next duel would start in 3 to 5 minutes if it was fast, and 8 to 9 minutes if it was slow. The first round, from 36 to 18, ended around 10:30. The second round, from 18 to 9, only took a little more than an hour. Then the third round, from 9 to 5. Under Professor Cheongsi's instructions, Dake entered the field to fill in the spots. Dake was very surprised, but he couldn't help but feel excited. He could finally play. How could watching others play cards compare to playing cards himself? He didn't care much about the dueling class, but after watching for a while, he couldn't help it. Is this the charm of a duel? His opponent was also surprised. The first-year student from the Noble Academy originally thought that he would be lucky enough to get a bye in this round, but the appearance of the filling in the spots caught him off guard. Don't be nervous, Civet, you can do it. With the encouragement of his good friend Rentgen, Civet climbed onto the platform with a gloomy face. Dake was already waiting on the platform. He observed the card table, put the cards he prepared in advance into the card slot on the right, and then injected magic. A trace of feedback came back. He knew that this card table not only had a projection mechanism, but also had a sound amplification function. In the official duel arena, the roar of the duelists could always pierce through the sky and suppress the cheers of the audience. Of course, it didn't rely on the voice. Beep. Preparation stage. 30s. The above words were displayed directly above the card table. Next to it was a countdown timer. On the top left corner of the card table, the remaining mana value of the magic ball was displayed at the same time. In other words, 1000. The countdown for the preparation stage would start after the shuffle and exchange ended. The duelists had 30 seconds to draw cards and think about tactics. Dake looked up at Civet opposite him and said, "Hello, Civet." Civet had short brown hair, a hooked nose, thick lips, and a few acne on his face. He was very recognizable. In the face of Dake's greeting, Civet suddenly said with a sad face, "Dake, go easy on me later." Dake comforted him. "Don't be nervous. The biggest charm of a duel is the infinite possibilities. Believe in yourself. Believe in your magic conducting card." Civet's nervousness eased a little. "Okay, I know." At the same time, the automatic shuffle ended. Professor Cheongsi whistled. "Beep. Begin preparation." The card table entered the 30s countdown. Draw cards. Dake's expression was a little serious, and he immediately took out 5 magic conducting cards from the top of the deck. Pride 2 Fantasy Beast. Ibu Pride Eye, Magic Bullet Spell. Diru Beast, my luck isn't too bad. The moment he saw Ibu, Dake was slightly relieved. He didn't want to get into trouble because he couldn't draw the first-tier magic conducting card. After drawing cards, he had less than 30 seconds to think. His mind was spinning fast. After a while, Professor Cheongsi's whistle sounded again. The words displayed on the card table changed to frowny face battle stage. 30s. In a formal duel, each round took 30 seconds. Except for the first round, the duelists could draw 2 magic conducting cards consecutively in each round to replenish their hand. There was no such thing as drawing empty cards equating to losing. In this round, the duelists could do whatever they wanted. "It's you, Ibu." It only took a little more than 4 seconds. Dake had completed the normal summoning of the first magic conducting card. Compared to the 8 seconds in the first-class competition, it was cut in half. If it was compressed by another 1 second, it would reach the theoretical limit of normal summoning. Squeak. Ibu landed in the light. 8 seconds later, a dark golden light shone down. Bathed in the light of Pride 2, Ibu's cute eyes became sharp. It raised its head high, its eyebrows full of arrogance. Card name, Fantasy Beast. Ibu Pride 2. Level for all, race Bird Beast, attribute, normal, magic power, 500, attack, 700, defense, 300, ultimate skills, imitation circle eyes. At this time, Civet had just summoned his first magic conducting spirit. It was a magic conducting spirit that looked like a unicorn beetle. It was obviously the result of a bet. The 30-meter-long field made the quick attack strategy Dake used in the first-class competition useless. Therefore, he decisively gave up on it, and chose to break through from the front. Ibu looked at the opposite side with disdain, its 4 limbs exerting force as it sprinted. Civet immediately gave an order to his unicorn beetle. "Thunder Beetle, charge." The unicorn beetle, with an intelligence level of 2.0, only moved after receiving the order. It lowered its head, and electricity gathered at the tip of its horn into a ball. The ball of electricity gradually grew bigger and made crackling sounds. Shockingly, it was an electric elemental magic guide fairy. Dake's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately recognized it. Thunder beetles were a type of insect that was common in the first tier, and they were electric magic conducting spirits. If one was lucky enough to reach the purple level, there was a high chance of obtaining the 2 ultimate skills, charge and generate. Through charge, to increase its power, it could convert the single target, generate, into an area of effect attack. Ibu would have nowhere to run under the large area of electric shock. The key is to not let it release, generate. Ibu's circle eyes. A slightly indifferent voice spread throughout the field. Ibu responded to its master's order, and its eyes suddenly widened as it ran. Its large black eyes emitted a dazzling dark golden light. A sense of arrogance pierced into the thunder beetle's heart through their gazes. At that moment, that kind of arrogance, as if it was sitting on the stars and overlooking the world, made the thunder beetle feel a great sense of defeat. It lost its desire to attack in an instant. The electricity accumulated on its horn even became chaotic. Ibu seized the opportunity and leaped up, directly sending the thunder beetle flying. Squeak! Ibu landed calmly and saw the ball of electricity on the thunder beetle's horn suddenly explode. The dazzling electricity fell on the thunder beetle's body, causing its magic to drop. It shook its head slightly, and just as it was about to express its pity for the arrogant, it suddenly felt the energy fluctuation above its head. This allowed it to jump in time and dodge Civet's magic bullet incantation. At this moment, the duel had entered the second round. However, Dake did not draw the 2 magic conducting cards. This was because he realized that Civet's card slot was already empty. Obviously, this student did not have the 6th magic conducting card. Since that was the case, Dake could not go too far. When Civet summoned the 2nd magic conducting spirit, his fantasy beast, Dake fired a magic bullet from afar, destroying it. Chapter 159. Magic Beast was usually a 1-star card with 100 magic power, 100 attack, and 100 defense. But the base power of the magic bullet spell was only 100. Even if the power of the magic bullet spell increased with the addition of magic power, the actual damage it caused was still not that great. But Ivan was already eyeing it covetously. When Civet's magic beast was shot down from the sky, Ivan casually clawed at it. As the 2 magic spirits were defeated one after another, Civet gritted his teeth and summoned his last magic spirit. It was the magic spirit that he had refined using the basic refining method in class. This magic guide sprite, which was only a 1-star magic guide sprite, was similarly unable to escape Abuse's ravaging, and was quickly defeated. The battle is over. Winner, Dake Dimung. As Civet's 3 magic spirits were defeated, Professor Cheongsi judged that Civet no longer had the ability to stop Dake from attacking the magic ball, so he decisively declared the winner. End stage. The words on the card table changed again. According to the normal procedure. Next should be the exchange, taunting, card collection, and declaration. The winner would be interviewed and make a declaration. The loser would leave some words such as "the green mountains never change," and "the green water will always flow." This duel would end here. But the atmosphere of the competition in class was not so aggressive. Civet left the stage early with a sullen face. Dark also accepted his card and stepped down from the stage after his victory. How is it, the feeling of winning a duel? Professor Cheongsi saw Dake walk back and asked. Dake sighed. It's okay, but it's a bit dull. Professor Cheongsi nodded. Indeed, this was not an evenly matched duel. Perhaps the 2nd grade competition is more suitable for you. Dake was startled. 2nd grade? Dake successfully filled in. 9-5 smoothly ended. The competition progressed to the 4th small round, 5-4. Once again, Professor Jones separated Dark from the rest. This time it was 4-3. The remaining 4 contestants would first fight in pairs to determine the 2 winners, and then the 2 losers would fight for the final spot. When the first round was over, it was already 1 in the afternoon. Professor Cheongsi gathered the students of the Noble Academy and said in a clear voice, "The first round of the competition is over. The winners should not be proud, and the losers should not be discouraged. No duelist was undefeatable. As a professor, I hope that you can all gain something from this competition. Next, I will announce the winners. First of all, Dake Dimung." Dark, who had only appeared once as a substitute, stood up. Diana bashfully clung to Dark's side. Teddy Dolan. The red-haired boy puffed out his chest, his eyes filled with fighting spirit. Johnny Yorkson. A tall and thin man who was half a head taller than the other students of the same grade walked out. Professor Cheongsi glanced at them and nodded with satisfaction. The 4 of you will represent the Noble Academy in the 2nd round of the competition in the afternoon. I don't want to say much, just bring back the champion. Yes. Dolan's vigorous response resounded throughout the stadium. The other three opened their mouths, and the atmosphere was a little awkward. Professor Cheongsi couldn't help but laugh and clap his hands. Next, you have 1.5 hours to eat and rest. At 2:30, you will gather here again. Dismissed. The little magisters immediately dispersed in an uproar. Luosi trotted over and played with Deanna. The three of them chatted as they walked and soon arrived at the cafeteria. Even though it was already 1 in the afternoon, the food in the cafeteria was still sumptuous. The halfling chefs always paid attention to keeping the food above a certain temperature in order to maintain the best taste. Dake ordered a few dishes and sat down at an empty table. After a while, Deanna and Luosi sat down one after another. The three of them ate lunch together, just like how they did for almost half of the noon in the past 3 months. Deanna stuffed a piece of roasted mutton into her mouth, puffed up her cheeks and asked vaguely, "Dake, how was my performance today?" Dake thought about it for a while. Deanna's performance was indeed quite outstanding among the first-year students of the Noble Academy at this time. Her bare series of magic elves were strong enough, and unexpectedly, not only did she have the magic elven card that she got from the gambling card, she also had a few extra magic cards. In particular, one of them, the bear's strength, helped her turn the tide in the last round of the first round. So Dake deliberated and said, "You did very well." Deanna was a little shy after hearing that, but also a little proud. She couldn't help but want to tell her little secret. But Dake raised his index finger and reminded her, "The method of making magic cards can't be revealed casually. For a magus, every secret recipe is a huge treasure." "It's okay." Deanna didn't care. "I just found the notes in a book and followed it, and I succeeded." Dake said with a straight face, "That's also your opportunity." Deanna, a girl's word. Luosi looked at the two of them repeatedly and couldn't help but smile. The lunch that day was still happy and harmonious. The coldness of winter seemed to have been dispelled. Around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the little magi who were supposed to be wandering around Traveler's Street returned to the #1 battle hall. The 4 professors gathered together to discuss the first round of the competition in the morning and comment on the students in their respective schools. As the conversation went on, they couldn't help but focus on a few key figures. Claire, who was in charge of the students of the House of Fools, sighed, "This year's House of Fools still needs to grow. Since my days as a student, their talents need to be accumulated over time to blossom and bear fruit." Professor Lily glanced at her. "Like Peter Shervich?" Professor Shierfu quickly glared at her and tried to ease the atmosphere. "Shervich is indeed the model of a well-prepared person. Lily, it seems that there are many outstanding students in this year's School of Magic?" Lily smiled. "Yes, our School of Magic's Dake Dimming is very outstanding." Professor Cheongsi rolled his eyes. "You can't wait to tie him to your feet." Lily said proudly, "Of course, he's Lily's sweetheart." Claire couldn't help but frown. Professor Shierfu was speechless. "Let's get down to business. How was Saraswati's performance?" Professor Lily's expression became serious. "She's already at the level of using knowledge in practice. It's said that she's the granddaughter of an ancient sage?" Claire interjected lightly, "She's his biological daughter." Lily was stunned and a trace of disbelief appeared on his face. "No way? Even the ancient sages are so old." "Claire, have you heard of the saying that old people get stronger?" Chapter 160. As the only person with a name in the first-year Mage Academy, Saraswati's name was still unknown. However, she was obviously valued by the professors. Having inherited the brown eyes and dark skin of the ancient sages, Sarah could be said to be very eye-catching in the academy where light skin was the main focus. Among the first-year students, no one could compare to her in terms of knowledge. In the first intra-class competition, Sarah couldn't beat AI Ma's golden treasure box. But this time she made a comeback with amazing momentum. Except for Sarah, AI Ma Métis of the Night Academy was also a point of great interest to the professors. As a professor of the Night Academy, Professor Shierfu naturally knew more about her. Just as you think, AI Ma Métis is also in the sage pedigree. Her mother is a disciple of the Sage of Mysteries. Professor Lily pouted. So why isn't she a student of the Mage Academy? Professor Shi-Erfu explained seriously. The selection ceremony is based on a student's magic power, talent, accomplishment, mentality, and other factors when they enter the academy. Since she was assigned to the Night Academy, it means that her qualities at that time were more suitable for the Night Academy, or her mentality was more inclined to the Night Academy. If we do it again now, the results may be different. Professor Cheongsi pointed at his muscular brain and said with a smile, "Courage and wisdom do not conflict." Professor Lily rolled her eyes and chuckled. Then they talked about the son of Bravehearts. Professor Shi-Erfu's expression softened slightly. White Gouda is still talented but a bit naughty. Under the guidance of the instructor, Ms. Gliss, she has also improved. But compared to the other three, she shook her head and didn't want to say more. Is it my turn next? Professor Cheongsi crossed his arms and said proudly, "We have few people in this year's Noble Academy, but there are many excellent students. Apart from Dake Dimming, Deanna Gratbeer and Teddy Dolan were good kids. In terms of character, I quite like Doran, but Deanna is indeed more likable." Professor Cheongsi, it's been so many years, but your hobby still hasn't changed. Claire helplessly replied. Professor Cheongsi, what's wrong with liking bears? Professor Shi-Erfu said, "Okay, let's start the second round." Then, the professors regained their spirits and walked out of the office. 2:30. All the first-year students had gathered in Combat Hall 1. But unlike in the morning, the students who failed to advance to the second round were very relaxed because they didn't have to go on stage. Most of them were watching the competition as spectators. However, the little magisters' collective sense of honor was still very strong. Almost every one of them was cheering for their own academy's contestants. The Academy of Knights and the Academy of Nobles, who had always been on opposite sides, bared their teeth at each other. Although the Academy of Knights was once proud of the brave son, Ai Mametis, had shown a strong competitiveness in the first round of the competition. This made them have strong expectations for this Miss Know-It-All who had gradually integrated into the group. The Academy of Nobles naturally placed their hopes on the defending champion, Dake Dimung. White Gouda had high hopes at the beginning of the school year, but now, no one cared about him. The gap between them was getting more and more obvious, making him breathless. When Halloween had just passed, he could still rely on his good results to maintain his mentality. Even after being grounded, he could still feel progress under the supervision of Ms. Gloria. In today's competition, he also had the goal of winning the championship. However, in the first round of the competition in the morning, he encountered a difficult battle. His classmates, who he didn't care about in the past, suddenly seemed to have become stronger. If it wasn't for the monster entering the berserk state, he might not even be able to advance to the second round. In short, his mood was very heavy at the moment. In his field of vision, he could no longer see Dake's back. The second round of the competition was slightly different. The 16-8 would still use the single loser elimination system. After the top 8 were determined, the double loser elimination system would be used. Every contestant would have 2 chances. If they failed the first time, they would not be directly eliminated. Instead, they would be placed in the losers group. They would only be eliminated if they failed the second time. After briefly explaining the rules, the professors began to distribute the number plates. From the Academy of Nobles to the Academy of Fools, the number plates were distributed in order. Dake was given number 1. Deanna was given number 2. After the 16 contestants were given number plates, the professors used the same number plates to randomly draw the competition schedule. The 16-8 would still be held in 4 venues at the same time. Soon, the professors posted the schedule of the competition. Dake was pulled over by Deanna and looked at the competition schedule. My next opponent, number 3? Isn't that Doran? He turned his head slightly and saw Teddy Doran, who also turned his head at the same time. The Doran family was a big family in the kingdom that was on par with the Garrett Bayer family. They were not only comrades in arms, but also absolute rivals. Dake vaguely remembered that he had fought with Doran in the last class competition. At that time, the little mages only had one phantasmal beast, and Doran's phantasmal beast seemed to be a fierce small dinosaur. However, Dake did not give him a chance to summon his phantasmal beast. Instead, he used a rapid attack to defeat him. Dake Demo. The red-haired boy clenched his teeth and said Dake's name. After the last competition, he was ashamed of being defeated. He learned from the painful experience and worked hard to improve himself. Finally, today he gained something. Not only did he successfully advance to the second round, but he also encountered Dake in the first round of the second round. This was the time to avenge his humiliation. I didn't expect the first round to be a civil war. Dake had a good impression of Doran. He looked at him with pity and then walked to the first arena with Deanna. There were a total of 8 matches in the top 16. They were divided into 2 groups. Deanna was in the second group. Dake was in the first group. Beep! Professor Cheong-si blew the whistle to remind the contestants of both teams to get on the stage. Dake stood on the stage that was 5 meters high and looked down. Even though it was his second time entering the arena, he still could not get used to the overly wide arena. Dake. Doran suddenly opened his mouth on the opposite side. Dake raised his head with a puzzled look. Doran said seriously, "Next I will give it my all." Even though Dake was annoyed, he still replied, "Same." After all, even a lion would give its all to catch a rabbit. Preparation stage. 30s. A standard number appeared on the card table. The 30s countdown begins. Chapter 161. HP 1000. My turn, draw a card. The moment he felt the cold touch of the magic card on his fingertips, Dake's heart sank. At the beginning of the duel, there was no card draw. There was no such thing as a turn. It was only based on the fact that human magic is very limited, that limited the number of cards in the deck. Under such circumstances, the duelists would always use up all their cards at the beginning. The so-called tactics were all predetermined. Who was strong and who was weak was already predetermined at the beginning of the duel. The duel was like a stage for the duelists to display their cards. It was okay at the beginning, but as time passed, it became boring. From the beginning to the rapid decline, it only took a very short time. Later on, the rules gradually changed. Based on the fact that during wartime, one could not guarantee the number and type of cards in one's hand, the Duel Alliance added a shuffle and card draw segment, adding endless possibilities to the duel. This allowed an industry that almost collapsed to develop again. Remember in a second. https://m. VIP can't you? VIP. In order to obtain victory in the duel, the duelists had to know their cards like the back of their hand. When they drew any card, they had to be able to improvise and come up with the corresponding tactics. To a certain extent, this also greatly increased the duelist's combat ability. With just a thought, Dake had already drawn 5 magic cards from the top of the deck. Kettle, Fantasy Beast, Ibu, Milken, Magic Bullet Curse, Bliss 3, alright. Dake only glanced at the cards in his hand, and many tactics flashed through his mind. Whether it was starting with Kettle or Fantasy Beast, Ibu, they were all good choices. But at this moment he suddenly heard Doran's excited shout. Good. Doran, who had also drawn 5 magic cards, had a look of excitement on his face. It was obvious that he had drawn a very advantageous hand. Even the deck responded to my call. What reason is there to lose? Doran suddenly looked up at Dake, his eyes burning like fire. Take a good look, this is my best. Battle stage, 30s magic summoning. Magic summoning. The duelists from both sides began to attack at the same time. In the 3rd month of school, Doran was already able to compress the normal summoning time to less than 10 seconds, which could be considered excellent. However, Dake, who was famous for his quick attacks, was still able to crush him without any suspense. In less than half the time, Dake summoned his first magic guide fairy. Kettle, which had materialized in the summoning area, extended its soft head out of its shell, and its eyes instantly became sharp. Even though Dake had created quite a few powerful new magical spirits, the gold-certified Kettle was still a core fighting force that couldn't be disregarded. Kettle, which was only 0.6 meters tall, stood in front of the magic conducting ball. only its aura reached a height of 2 meters. Card name: Kettle. Type: Elf card. Level: ****. Race: Insect. Attribute: Rock. Magic power: 900 attack, 0 defense, 200 ultimate skill. Sturdy = strength = defense = strength. Trick: in the judging area. Professor Cheongsi crossed her arms in front of her chest with great interest. She had already learned from Professor Kazair that Dake had such a kettlebug. However, even though the kettlebug had extremely powerful defenses, it wasn't very useful in actual duels. As long as one ignored it, it was a useless card. However, it said that the kettlebug in dimming is a gold card. This should be the first time in history that a gold kettlebug has appeared. I wonder what kind of surprise it will bring us. Then, she looked at Dolan's summoning area. Roar! A few seconds later, a magic guide fairy with obvious characteristics of a dragon appeared with a roar. Card name: Little Rock Dragon. Type: Elf card. Level: ****. Race: Dragon. Attribute: Dragon/Rock. Magic power: 1100. Attack: 1500. Defense: 1000. Ultimate skill: Rock Horn. Unlike the petite kettlebug, the grayish-white little rock dragon with hard skin had a height of more than 2 meters when it stood upright. The aura between the two was on a completely different level. If one didn't look at the card, it would be hard to imagine that this was a magic guide fairy of the same level. In the 3-star category, the little rock dragon's attack data could be said to have reached the limit of a 3-star magic guide fairy. It was worthy of being called a top dragon. After summoning the little rock dragon, Dolan let out a low roar. Little Rock Dragon Rock Horn. Above the little rock dragon's head, a grayish-white rock horn suddenly condensed. Its attack power skyrocketed by 300. Charge forward and crush them. Dolan stretched out his hand and pointed at Kettlebug. His loud shout resounded throughout the venue. The Night Academy students outside the venue seemed to be motivated by Dolan's enthusiasm. Especially the few people who were usually in the same circle as Dolan. They were so excited that they clenched their fists. After all, who didn't want to see a loser counterattack? The card's magic projection was facing up at a 45 degrees angle. From their point of view, they couldn't see the specific data displayed on the card. This was completely different from playing cards in the game. A real-life showdown between magic guide fairies wasn't just addition and subtraction of data, but data could always be used as a reference. Dolan completely didn't expect Kettlebug's defense value to be as high as 2,200 points. He also didn't have the tactical idea of going around it. Because he didn't understand a magic guide fairy like Kettlebug. In his mind, there was only pure violence and crushing. At this time, Dake calmly summoned a second magic guide fairy, Fantasy Beast Ibu. Following Ibu's appearance, some soft cheers came from outside the venue. They were all attracted by Ibu. Kettlebug moved slowly. Dake summoned Ibu to protect the magic guide ball. Roar! The little rock dragon had already crossed half the stage. Its upper body was lowered, and the rock protrusions on its head were as sharp as dragon horns. BVZ. Only Kettlebug, whose aura wasn't any weaker than Dolan's, struggled to move forward by 2 meters. Divide the power equally. The instant the two sides were about to come into contact, Kettlebug's superpower activated. In an instant, it added its and the little rock dragon's basic attack and divided it equally. The attack values on the magic guide cards of both sides changed instantly. Kettlebug. Attack 750 Little Rock Dragon. Attack 1050, with the corresponding strength, Kettlebug could grip the ground tightly and not be knocked away. It shrank its head and used its carapace to withstand the impact of the little rock dragon. The carapace only trembled slightly. BZZT. It was soft and didn't hurt or itch. The little rock dragon's rock horns were almost broken by the reaction force. It didn't give Dolan a chance to recover. Dake went all out. Power trick. Kettlebug's attack and defense were switched. A yellow tentacle stretched out from its carapace. With an attack of up to 2,200, it punched out. Bang! The little rock dragon's huge head, which had taken the initiative to come over, was actually blasted apart by this punch. The audience exclaimed. Chapter 162. Hiss. Isn't the attack of the kettle bug zero? Professor Cheong-si was still hoping that this unique golden kettle bug would bring some surprises. But now that the surprise had really come, she was completely stunned. Wasn't this surprise a little too big? As everyone knew, the kettle bug was a magic elf card with 0 attack power. Its high defense power of 2,200 came at the cost of completely sacrificing its attack power and mobility. Even the golden card that was known as the God's card in the past could not change this point. It was even more impossible to destroy the little rock dragon with one punch. Then it's a problem with the ultimate skill. Professor Cheong-si calmed down and immediately realized where the problem was. In this world, the kettle bug was a super rare magic elf that did not exist in reality. It only appeared in experiments with a very low probability. The first website was https://m. Vipcanchu. VIP, and so far, most of the recorded kettle bugs were white cards. The few that were at most blue cards only had one passive skill, Sturdy. Dark's golden kettle bug could be said to be one of a kind. In other words, it had at least 3 skills that no one knew about. What kind of ultimate skill could make a 3-star magic elf card so exaggerated? Professor Cheong-si was puzzled. Professor Cheong-si was shocked, let alone Doran, who was on the field. Both of them usually summoned first-tier magic elf cards. How could his magic elf be destroyed with one punch? Doran looked at the little rock dragon's attack value that had temporarily become 1050, and the entire magic elf card that had dimmed. He became anxious. The little rock dragon could be said to be his ace magic elf. After using the ultimate skill, its attack value of 1,800 points should be unparalleled in 3-star territory. What kind of monster is that kettle bug? While the corner of Doran's mouth twitched, he noticed that the countdown for the first round had ended, and the match had entered the second round. He quickly pulled out 2 new magic elf cards from the top of the deck. The number of cards in his hand became 6. 6 magic guide cards. Other than the magic bullet spell, the rest were all magic guide elf cards. Doran didn't have time to think and quickly chose the Nut Dragon to summon. Card name, Nut Dragon. Type, elf card. Level, *****. Race, dragon. Attribute, dragon/grass. Magic power, 1200 attack, 900 defense, 1300 ultimate skill, none. Doran was no longer as hot-blooded as he was at the start of the battle. The nut dragon he chose in a hurry was a small dinosaur with a head like a nut. Only its head had a defense of 1,300 points. It was a defense-oriented magic fairy. When the attack failed, they would subconsciously seek stability. At the same time, Dake drew 2 new magic cards. 2 cards appeared in his hand. They were Energy Potion and Diru Beast. The moment the cards entered his hand, Dake began a new round of summoning. Kettle Kettle only had the power for one punch. After one punch, the ultimate skill Power Trick's effect disappeared. Equal distribution of power could be maintained for a longer time. Its attack was still at 750, but with Kettle Kettle's movement speed, it couldn't touch the opponent's magic ball. Illusory Beast, Ibu was only able to protect the ball. This was also the biggest flaw in Dake's deck, the lack of a powerful 3-star magic guide elf. So he used the sacrificial summoning in the second round. With Fantasy Beast, Ibu and Kettle Kettle as sacrifices, sacrificial summoning, Diru Beast. The 2 magic guide elves on the field turned into white light at the same time and gathered in the middle. The white light shot out from the Diru Beast magic guide card and merged into it. A white cat with blue vertical pupils slowly floated out from the sacrificial summoning light with one knee on the ground. The whole process took 10 seconds. Diru Beast joined. Almost at the same time, new magic guide elves appeared in the summoning area of both sides. But the expressions of both sides were very different. Sacrificial summoning. It's actually sacrificial summoning. Seeing the appearance of the white cat, Doran's face turned green. Using 1-star and 3-star as sacrifices, I summoned a 4-star magic guide elf. He quickly checked his hand. But looking left and right, there were only elven cards, and there wasn't even a 4-star card in his hand. There were no more powerful high-star magic guide elves. There were also no magic cards to resolve the situation. It was only the second round, and Teddy Doran was already in a desperate situation. Diru Beast Cat Fist. With the support of the Divine Holy Ring, the Diru Beast's magic power, attack, and defense reached 2,000, 2,400, and 1,400 respectively. At this stage, it was almost invincible. What was even more outstanding was its high mobility in addition to its 3 measurements. It easily crossed the field that was only 30 meters long. The cat's claw, which was copied from the Golden Sword Lion's claw data, instantly tore apart the nut dragon that specialized in defense. The nut dragon screamed and turned into light, leaving only a pitch-black claw shadow in the air. The Magic Guide Ball life barrier with only 1,000 magic power points couldn't withstand the power of the Diru Beast's claw at all. As the life barrier was shattered in one strike, this battle where both players had gone all out was completely over. Beep. After Professor Cheongsi's whistle sounded. It was half a beat late. The surrounding students were in an uproar. Discussions sounded crazily. While most of the little magicians were still relying on the random refining method to gamble, their students of the same grade had already refined an extremely powerful 4-star magic guide elf. The light array of the sacrificial summoning spell was like a key that directly knocked on one's heart, making one unable to help but yearn for the even more resplendent world behind the magic gate. There was no doubt that Dark Diamond had played a leading role. While Professor Cheongsi was praising in his heart, he couldn't help but worry about Doran. I hope he won't fall silent, because of a momentary failure. But if he couldn't even cross such a small hurdle, it wasn't worth looking forward to. Of course, as a professor, she would try her best to do some psychological counseling. Battle ended. Winner, Dake Dimung. End stage. Dake kept the Diru Beast back into the magic card, then took out the deck on the card table and prepared to leave the stage. But just as he was about to turn around, a shout from Doran came from the opposite side. Dake. Dake stopped and chose to listen. Doran gritted his teeth. The fall from heaven to hell made his voice tremble. Just go ahead, I'll definitely catch up. Dake's expression eased a little. Then he smiled and replied, I'm looking forward to it. Chapter 163. His initial policy was to reduce social interactions and cultivate his character. Other than Deanna and Luo Si, who he couldn't avoid, Dake didn't have much interaction with the other students. However, this student Dolong had undoubtedly obtained his favorable impression. A person who was both motivated and willing to take action was the easiest to impress. He had some expectations for Doran's growth and slowly walked down the stage. Round of 16 to 8. The winner advanced and the loser exited. There were 4 arenas, and each arena had 2 rounds of battles. Dake followed Deanna to Arena 2 and watched her duel. The little sorcerers had limited cards, and at this stage, there wasn't much of a gap between them. Remember the URL. VIP can't you? 6. Therefore, in the round of 16, most of the competitors were evenly matched, and very few could hide their trump cards. By observing their matches, they would be able to gain an understanding of their strength on paper. In the round of 16 to 8, Deanna encountered player 8. Players 2 and 8 enter the arena as soon as possible. Professor Shi Erfu, the head of the Night Academy, blew a whistle. Come on. Come on. After being cheered on by Luo Si, Deanna walked up to the red team's arena in high spirits. On the other side, the blue team's player was the hero's son. So white is player 8. Dake's heart skipped a beat, and he was looking forward to this match. However, Luo Si, who was beside him, couldn't help but clench his fingers and say worriedly, how could it be white? There's no loser's arena for the round of 16 to 8. Dake asked curiously, why is there a loser's arena? Can't he just win? But Luo Si poked his finger and said hesitantly, but isn't the hero's son very powerful? Dake said, maybe. After all, he was the first year's runner-up in the Halloween event. Dake suddenly realized that he hadn't paid attention to White's progress in a long time. I wonder if he has made a new magic card? There seemed to be a lot of people paying extra attention to this match. The halo of the hero's son still existed. More than half of the people gathered outside the venue. Ai Mametis, who had won the previous match, and Saraswati also appeared. Beside AI Ma, there were only two girls who often sat next to her. If you looked further, you could see Luo Boat Broheim in the crowd. Saraswati seemed to have a high reputation in the School of Magic. Most of the girls in the School of Magic Arts crowded around her. With her silver hair and brown skin, she was extremely eye-catching. Of course, the students of the Night Academy were the ones with the most numbers. Although White thought that no one cared about him anymore, the truth was that the people who should be paying attention to him were still paying attention to him. They just weren't as enthusiastic as before. When they first came into contact with him, the students would instinctively think that the hero's son must be very outstanding. But now, that thought had gradually changed to that of the hero's son should have something special. Moreover, the Academy of Knights already had an exceptionally excellent representative. They placed more of their hopes on AI Ma. They didn't care so much about White. Amidst all these thoughts, the match began. Preparation stage. Deanna tiptoed to make herself look taller, but she felt tired and gave up. The height of the table on the stage wasn't good for her, but fortunately, it didn't affect her too much. After putting the cards into the card slot according to the rules, she raised her head and looked at White across from her. She raised her hand and greeted him enthusiastically. Hey. Hello. In fact, White was still a little depressed, so he didn't respond because he was distracted. Deanna puffed up her cheeks, thinking that she had to use a little more strength later. 30s, the shuffling of cards ended, and the whistle sounded. A countdown appeared above the table. The players on both sides immediately calmed down and drew their cards. Deanna looked at the Bear of Earth in her hand and smiled. I'm in luck. The Bear of Earth was a magic elf that she refined using the basic refining method in class. Among all the discarded cards, that 2-star magic conducting card was still the one she really liked. Card name, Bear of Earth. Type, elf card. Level, Yin race, bird beast. Attribute, ground. Magic power, 1000. Attack, 800. Defense, 1000. Killer skills, earth force bears fetters. Both magic power and defense had reached the top standard of a 2-star magic elf card, and its attack power was not weak either. There were 2 killer skills, which belonged to the rarer purple card. Moreover, these 2 sure kill skills were very practical. On the other side, Werther also drew 5 cards from his hand. Among them, the troll made him feel more at ease. It was a pity that he didn't get the taboo love. Fantasy beast, stag, taboo love, troll, and another 3-star magic elf card were the core of his cards. During this period, he also looked for opportunities to gamble cards. Although he only gambled a few times, his luck was not bad. He dripped his blood into the number 1 refining array, and finally obtained a new 3-star card. He had not gotten his hands on it yet. Battle stage, 30s. The moment the first round began, both sides began to summon their magic elf without hesitation. White was faster than Deanna, but there was a limit to it. Deanna's magic talent was very outstanding. Although it could not be compared to the hero's bloodline, it was still outstanding. Only 2 seconds later, the starting sprites of both sides appeared one after another. This was not the first time White's troll had appeared. Its tall body was very rare among 3-star magic elves, and it was unusually eye-catching. It crushed the little rock dragon's 3 dimensions panel in all aspects, making the troll extremely ferocious. Card name, Troll. Type, elf card. Level, Yen. Race, subhuman. Attribute, normal. Magic power, 1200. Attack, 1500. Defense, 1400. Ultimate skill, reckless tackle. Rage. Whether it was the panel data or the momentum of the appearance, the troll was definitely better. Smash it, troll. Once it entered the duel, White had a natural momentum. He knew that Deanna's Bear of Earth was only a 2-star card, and it could not be a match for the troll. Ow! The troll beat its chest with both hands and roared. It wasted a few seconds before charging forward. Bear of Earth, hold on. Deanna immediately gave the order, and the second magic card in her hand was ready. Bang! After a loud noise, the Bear of Earth successfully blocked the troll's 2-handed hammer cannon. Its magic power had decreased a lot because of this. However, the Earth's strength, that kept surging from its feet made its magic power slowly recover a little. Then the first round ended. Deanna did not immediately draw the card, but successfully summoned the second magic card. Magic Beast Polar Bear. Almost at the same time, Bear's Bond was triggered. A yellow halo appeared under the Bear of Earth's feet. Its magic power, attack, and defense all increased by 200 points at the same time. This made the 3 dimensions of the Bear of Earth and the Troll closer. Deanna reached out and took out 2 new magic cards. It's coming. Her smile gradually bloomed. Chapter 164. Under the effect of Bear's Bond. The Earthen Bear's 3 measurements would increase by 200 points for every additional bear that established a bond with it within 100 meters. The highest number of increases was 3. Roar. The Earthen Bear used its sudden increase in strength to push the giant monster away. Then, with a giant bear charge, the giant monster staggered. The giant monster seemed to be embarrassed and angry because of this. It twisted its waist, and its thick giant hand swept across like a giant hammer. But this strike that seemed like a hot knife through butter was successfully blocked by the Earthen Bear. Earth Strength was activated. A layer of yellow light surged from its feet again, and it recovered some of the magic it had lost. It took the opportunity to retreat and defend the magic ball. Its defense has increased? White was shocked. He subconsciously took out 2 new cards from the top of the deck and added them into his hand. Then he glanced at them and was instantly relieved. Taboo Love was among them. The life enchantment of the magic conducting orb only had a mana value of 1,000 points, so the more powerful magic conducting fairies could easily shatter it with a single blow. It was also a slightly evil idea to turn the magic elf guarding the magic ball into the culprit that destroyed the magic ball. However, White didn't do that immediately. While he commanded the giant monster to continue attacking, he summoned his second magic elf. That wasn't Magic Beast Stag, but a new 2-star magic elf. Card name, Goblin Warrior. Type, elf card. Level, race, demi-human. Attribute, fighting. Magic power, 300. Attack, 500. Defense, 300. Ultimate skill, Goblin Whirlwind. It had long ears and a pointy nose, and it looked like an ugly demi-human. It had a simple shield on its left arm, and a rusty short knife in its right hand. The Goblin Warrior turned into a solid body in the light. Then it smirked and rushed towards Deanna's Magic Beast. As a 1-star magic elf, the Magic Beast's stats weren't high. Even though the Goblin Warrior wasn't very strong, it was more than enough to deal with the polar bear. White glanced at her hand. In the remaining 5 cards, apart from Taboo Love and Magic Bullet Incantation, they were all white cards that were inferior to the Goblin Warriors. Originally, such a card shouldn't have appeared in the deck. But in a situation where there were no other magic cards to replace them, using them to fill the deck was a very helpless choice. Goblin Whirlwind. Seeing that the Goblin Warrior was already in front of the white bear with his sword, Werther immediately gave the order. Jijia. The Goblin Warrior responded to its master's command. A white light surged out from its hand and climbed onto the blade. As it ran, it twisted its waist, and its entire body, along with the blade, rotated more than 180 degrees. It was an astonishing horizontal slash. Dubai dodge. However, the polar bear chose to avoid the attack. According to Deanna's strategy, the polar bear, who was in charge of defense, turned around and grabbed the magic ball, running with it. The Goblin Warrior's attack missed. He was so angry that he stomped his feet and chased after the polar bear. In a situation where the first-year students hadn't learned how to use magic to control the magic ball from a distance, running with the ball was a very common strategy. To counter this strategy, the easiest way was to summon another magic elf and form a pincer attack. White prepared to summon the third magic elf immediately after the cooldown of the usual summoning spell was over. Even if the third magic elf was useless, it could still be used to block the polar bear. Overall, his thinking was very clear. If he went step by step, he would have a great advantage. Deanna from the aristocrat house didn't seem to be as strong as he thought. Just as this thought flashed through his mind, White suddenly noticed that Deanna was unusually excited as she raised the magic card in her hand. Under the gazes of many people, the magic card emitted an extremely dazzling light. The strength of the bear. Deanna's loud shout resounded through the entire arena. On the field, facing the troll's attack, the bear of earth was barely able to resist. Its eyes suddenly changed, and its body was covered by a layer of extremely bright light. It then let out an excited roar, and strength surged from its limbs and bones. Visible to the naked eye, the outline of muscles appeared on the bear of earth's body, and its body suddenly swelled up by one size. Although it was still not as big as the troll, it was already close to 3 meters tall. Roar. In the roar, the bear of earth finally vented out the humiliation of being suppressed for the entire round. It ran 2 steps, and like a heavy armored tank, it fiercely slammed into the troll's abdomen. Bang! The arrogant troll was actually sent flying. The entire arena was in an uproar. The aristocrat house students had already seen the strength of the bear, but the night house students saw it for the first time. Earbook couldn't help but worry outside the arena, but when he remembered that White still had forbidden love, he was relieved. If the bear of earth only relied on brute force, it wouldn't be a threat to White. In my opinion, White just wanted to try to win the battle head-on, and that's why he dragged the battle until now. Otherwise, Deanna would have been defeated long ago. He talked endlessly in the crowd, but it seemed like he was being ignored. The bear of earth's sudden outburst made White's face turn stiff. He subconsciously stopped the normal summoning spell that he was chanting halfway, and unconsciously took out forbidden love. No, it's not over yet. White suddenly realized that there was something wrong with his mentality. He quickly stabilized his mind and roared, "Troll, sacrificial tackle." Sacrificial tackle was an extremely powerful sure-kill skill. It could reduce one's magic power by half to inflict heavy damage to the enemy. Although the troll lost some magic power due to the bear of earth's attack, it still had more than half of its magic power left. After receiving the order, the troll's eyes turned red, and its originally ferocious aura suddenly became even more ferocious. It steadied its body slightly, then immediately moved its thick legs and rushed toward the bear of earth. In the process of rushing, an extremely strong bloody light burst out from its body, as if it was a peerless ferocious beast, frightening everyone. But on the other side of the contestants' stage, Deanna was getting more and more excited. Her innate talent for combat filled her with a thirst for battle, and the magic guiding fairies she had refined were all warlike. Don't retreat, defeat it head-on. The white light on the bear of earth's body became stronger and stronger. Bear's strength gave it an extra attack of star level x300, which increased its attack power to a terrifying 1600. This had obviously surpassed the top level of a 3-star magic elven. Coupled with the explosive power of a bear, its aura was ferocious. The troll and the bear of earth. 2 gigantic magic elves violently collided. It was like 2 heavy trucks colliding. A strong wind burst out from the point of contact. Almost all the students subconsciously held their breaths and stared. Roar! Roar! The bear of earth's strength overwhelmed the troll. However, the troll's desperate charge also broke the bear of earth's defense, causing great damage to the bear of earth. The magic power of both magic elves dropped to the freezing point at the same time. The third round, draw a card. The aura of both sides was completely different from before the duel. Deanna quickly drew a card, then excitedly raised one of the magic elves, and continued to summon. White pulled out a magic elven card that she just drew with a serious expression, and summoned it faster than Deanna. Magic elven summoned Luminous Python. A snow-white python that was not inferior to the troll in size appeared in the white light. Card name, Luminous Python. Type, elf card. Level, *****. Race, reptile. Attribute, light. Magic power, 1400. Attack, 1400. Defense, 1400. Ultimate skill, Sacred Light. It's coming, it's coming. Earbook's excited shouts were unusually eye-catching. But at this moment, no one cared about his embarrassment. This was the first time White summoned his new trump card in public. The Luminous Python had 1400 magic attack and defense, and its bucket-like waist made it almost have no weaknesses. Its delicate snake scales reflected a clear white light under the illumination of the room's lights. Its head was inlaid with snow-white gems, and its eyes did not have the cold-blooded cruelty of reptiles. Instead, it had a kind of gentleness. Compared to the troll, it was the polar opposite. It was beautiful and sacred. People could not help but think of the moon goddess statue before it opened its eyes. Dake squinted slightly. This was the magic elven that matched the identity of the hero. But the outcome was still uncertain. Only 2 or 3 seconds later, Deanna also summoned her third magic elven pet. Walking out of the light was the spirit of the giant bear, which seemed to be the embodiment of light. The giant bear was 3 meters tall with 4 limbs on the ground, and its eyes were deep and kind. It seemed to be old, and was different from the rest of Deanna's battle pets. The battle intent of youth had faded, and what was left was the understanding of the vicissitudes of life. This was the embodiment of the bear's will. It was the spirit of all bears. Card name, Spirit Bear. Type, Elven card. Level, *****. Race, undying species. Attribute, light. Magic power, 1400. Attack, 1700. Defense, 0. Ultimate skill, Spirit Bear Summon. As the embodiment of light energy, the Spirit Bear had almost no defense, but it had a strong immunity to pure physical attacks. At the cost of this, it could break through the limit of 3-star attacks. The only ultimate skill seemed to be hiding a mysterious and great power. It was also the first time Deanna summoned her only 3-star magic elven pet in public. Among the large number of useless cards, only this Spirit Bear was a surprise that exceeded expectations. The luminous python and the Spirit Bear replaced the troll and the earth bear, and became the focus of attention. At the same time, Bear's Bond was triggered. The earth bear's magic attack and defense increased by 200 points again. Attack, 1800, defense, 1400, when everyone's attention was attracted by the 2 new magic guide fairies that had just appeared. The earth bear gained an overwhelming advantage in the last confrontation with the troll. The troll, that Victor was so proud of, was sent away by the earthen bear, without using the berserk, surekill skill. However, from the blind spot of the earth bear, a dagger suddenly appeared and pierced through the earth bear's waist. From the side, the goblin warrior revealed a ferocious smile. The earth bear's magic power was reduced to 0. Sacred light. White raised the luminous python magic card to the highest point. The luminous python's body and the magic card emitted a sacred white light at the same time. It was like the light of the soul. A light skill that covered a large area without any blind spots. The goblin warrior's ferocious smile was covered by the light. The fantasy beast, polar bear, that was exposed to the sacred light melted like water. The magic power of the Spirit Bear, that was on the opposite side, was also decreasing. The undying species with 0 defense could not withstand the damage of the sacred light at all. However, at the critical moment, Deanna immediately activated the ultimate skill of the Spirit Bear. Spirit Bear Summoning. The old Spirit Bear was still calm even under the illumination of the sacred light. The light that formed its body clashed with the sacred light. Finally, a ray of white light broke through the seal. The ray of white light drew a circle beside it, and a pure white flower bloomed from the center of the circle. A new spirit emerged from the summoning formation. They looked at each other. White's expression changed greatly. The newly summoned Spirit Bear was the Earth Bear that was killed by the Goblin Warrior's sneak attack. Card name, Earth Bear. Type, Spirit Bear. Level, XXX race, undying species. Attribute, light. Magic power, 1000. Attack, 800. Defense, 0. Ultimate skill. None White did not know that the revived Earth Bear had become a white card with 0 defense. As the sacred light faded, the Spirit Bear was still alive. Coupled with the Earth Bear that was reborn from the dead, the pressure multiplied. White unknowingly placed his hand on taboo love again. Whenever he was in trouble, he would think of it immediately. In the arena, the Goblin Warrior was killed by the Earth Bear that chased after it with 2 slaps. The Spirit Bear was wrestling with the Radiant Python. Even the most gentle creature had a ferocious side. The 2 light elves rolled, fought, and tied each other up. It was extremely intense. However, physical attacks had no effect on the light elemental spirit bear. The radiant python's defense was strong enough. Although the magic power of both sides was decreasing, it was very slow. The earth bear that successfully killed the goblin warrior joined the battle, without hesitation. The spirit bear's magic power was insufficient. The earth bear held the radiant python back, and became a reliable frontline. The spirit bear was finally able to use its 1,700 points of attack power. Every time it waved its paw, a portion of its magic power would be used. The radiant python was defeated by the two righteous elves. Werther's heart was filled with urgency. He looked around and quickly looked for the red magic ball. Finally, he found the magic ball behind the spirit bear. I didn't want to, he muttered something under his breath. White raised taboo love. After a few seconds, the summoning was successful. The fog released from taboo love floated into the arena and went into the spirit bear's body. The spirit bear paused abruptly. Then, its expression became evil and heartsuit appeared in its eyes. The spirit bear was attracted by taboo love and was controlled by White in a single round. Roar! The spirit bear suddenly roared and turned around to slap the magic ball. With its high attack power, this slap was enough to shatter the life enchantment. However, the spirit bear did not do as White wished. The bear's paw that was raised high did not fall down. How can the bond between me and the spirit bear be severed by a mere charm? Deanna's declaration crushed White's heart. 2-in-1 4,300 words. Chapter 165. Bang! White slammed his palm on the table, his face twisted as if he had seen a ghost. Forbidden love. Core ability was indeed brainwashing, but with the magic fairy's intelligence level of less than 3, it was impossible for it to get rid of the brainwashing control on its own, unless the corresponding curse removal card was used. However, Deanna did not activate any magic card at all. Just because of a lie? How is this possible? White could not understand this phenomenon at all. His fingers holding the magic card tightened unconsciously. No matter what, forbidden love had lost its effect. After the radiant python's ultimate skill went into cooldown, it was difficult for it to cause any damage to the two magic fairies. After just one round, the originally favorable situation had been completely ruined. First website. https://m. But can't you? VIP White's palms were sweating. What should he do next? White was not the only one who was surprised. Professor Shirfa's surprise was no less than White's. As a professor of the Academy of Knights, she was more concerned about White. At the same time, she was very clear about the effects of forbidden love. She can rely on the bond with the magic fairy to forcefully remove the brainwashing. I didn't expect Deanna to have such a strong spirit magister qualification. No wonder Pawa likes her so much. They are practically carved from the same mold. I really didn't expect this. Dake opened his mouth to express his surprise. He had taught Diana almost single-handedly, but now, she had clearly exceeded his expectations. He was still thinking of establishing a bond with the magical elf through the method of affection after a long time, after refining Zoo. He did not expect Deanna to have already established a bond with his spirit bear. So it is true that the purer the soul, the easier it is to establish a bond with the magic fairy? Dake could not help but think of Professor Claire's teachings these days. Before Professor Claire developed the zoo, she had established a bond with her own magic elf. Her soul was very pure at that time, and deep in her heart was a pure love for the magic fairy. She was not too utilitarian. He didn't know much about mind summoning either. Just like Deanna at this moment, she had only heard of it. Maybe Deanna is more suitable than me to be the inheritor of the beast sage? Of course, sometimes, the most suitable one was not necessarily the best. Dake continued to watch the match. At this time, the duel had already progressed to the 4th round. But both sides didn't have many card sets left. Victor, on the other hand, only had one magic card left. He knew very well what the last magic card was, so much so that he didn't even have the desire to draw it. It was his illusory beast. The first magic guide sprite of the Little Magisters. He really liked that stag, but it was a pity that it was only a one-star fantasy beast, stag. Its stats were too low. When there was no need to sacrifice a high-star magical guiding spirit to summon, the one-star, magical beast, stag was no different from those useless cards. That was what he thought. That was why he didn't take out magical beast, stag in the end. The battle is over. Winner, Deanna Gratbeer. White didn't use any more magic cards. In the end, he couldn't block the spirit bear's attack. The life enchantment of the magic ball that represented his health was completely shattered. End stage. White supported himself with both hands on the card table. It was as if he had gone through a life and death battle. He was completely exhausted. In the first intraclass competition, he lost to AI Ma. In the second intraclass competition, he couldn't even cross the threshold of Deanna. Was it because he didn't improve? That didn't seem to be the case. It was just that the other students improved faster than him. So what should he do next? Hey God. Deanna's voice came from afar. White raised his head reluctantly. Deanna blinked her big eyes and asked curiously, "What's your last magic card? Why didn't you take it out?" White glanced at the last magic card in the card slot. He took it out and put it back into the card bag. He then said casually, "Nothing, a useless card." Then he turned around and left the contestant stage. His back view looked very lonely. The students who were watching the battle probably didn't expect White to be stopped in the round of 16. Many people were surprised. However, they had to admit that Deanna was really strong. The students from the Aristocrats Academy were the happiest. The morale of the Knights Academy was obviously suppressed. Sarah from the Magic Academy whispered to her friends. She pointed at White and Deanna from time to time. AI Ma from the Knights Academy just sighed. She played with the winged gold coin in her hand and left. Only Luo Boat was left waiting for White. "White, don't be discouraged." Luo Boat quickly hugged White's shoulder and comforted him. Deanna's magic card must have been made by Dake. Besides, we've already made up for some of our homework, haven't we? When we master more knowledge, we'll definitely be able to make more powerful magic fairies. White took a deep breath and forced a smile. Ah, you're right. We still have to go to the detention room tonight. On the other side, Deanna, who had left the contestant stage, bounced to Dake and Luosi and showed off. "What do you think? My little bear." Dake said sincerely, "That's really awesome." Deanna, "Hey, hey, hey." Luosi quickly reminded her. "Don't be so proud. You have to replenish the magic power of the magic card as soon as possible." Deanna suddenly pouted. "Okay." With the end of the round of 16, all 8 contestants finally made it to the next round. The next round would be a double elimination round. Every contestant would have 2 chances to advance. However, the game didn't start immediately. The 8 contestants either rested or replenished their magic power. They were all waiting for the next round. Half an hour later, all the contestants gathered together. Professor Cheong-si gave a summary and speech, and then the new schedule was announced. Dake looked at the schedule. "My opponent is..." "No." Deanna said excitedly. "I'm Nose." Luosi counted with his fingers. "No should be Saraswati from the School of Magic. No should be the School of Fools. Deanna's luck is not bad." In other words, Dake's luck wasn't good. Saraswati. Dake felt that someone was looking at him, so he turned around and saw Sarah, who was already observing him. She was worthy of being the top student in the first year of the School of Magic. Although she was physically weak, her complexion looked quite healthy. Her white hair was tied up in front of her chest. Her eyes were lighter than her skin color, her nose was high, and her lips were slightly plump, which made her look more attractive. Dake showed a polite smile and nodded to her. Although they hadn't spoken a word since the beginning of the semester, they actually saw each other almost every day. They were both regulars of the library. Without a doubt, she was a strong opponent. Begging for a monthly ticket. Chapter 166. Beep. Under the urging of the whistle, Dake and Deanna encouraged each other and separated. The other 8 contestants also arrived at their respective venues according to the schedule. Venue 1. Number 1 versus number 9 venue 2. Number 2 versus number 9 venue 3. Number 5 versus number 9 venue 4. Number 7 versus number 9. The duel between Dake and Sarah attracted more attention. More than half of the students chose to watch the duel in venue 1. Even White, who was defeated by Deanna, couldn't help but appear in the crowd with Luo Boat. He remembered the URL. VIP can't you? 6. He was deeply afraid of the reality that he was gradually disappearing from the crowd. His subconscious behavior was to catch the highlights of the outstanding contestants. Contestant number 1 Dake Dimming and number 9 Sarah Swati. I don't think I need to introduce them too much. Contestants, please enter the contestant stands. Professor Cheong-si's voice was still as loud and energetic as ever. Dake and Sarah entered the contestant stands. Sarah Swati didn't start the card table until she was on the stage. She said from afar, "Hello." Dake put his hand on the card table and replied with magic power, "Hello." He felt like he had to force himself to call her even though she was right in front of him. Sarah squinted her eyes and smiled. The semester is almost over. This is the first time we're talking, right? Dake nodded slightly. But it's not the first time we're talking. Sarah paused for a moment and then smiled. You're really good at talking. I should have known you earlier. Dake put the cards into the slot on the card table. It's not too late now. Sarah's expression gradually became serious. Let's get to know each other in the duel. Preparation stage. Dake and Sarah's remote communication added a lot of color to the match. The School of Magic was not like the House of Fools, which always stood aloof from worldly affairs. However, because the classes were held at different times from the School of Knights and the School of Nobles, there was no competition. Moreover, most of the students wished that they had 25 hours in a day. The rich collection of Shengmalian books attracted them all the time. For this reason, the relationship between the Academy of Magic Devices and the Academy of Nobles was not as sharp as the relationship between the Academy of Knights and the Academy of Nobles. It was only at this moment, when the top students of both academies stood on the dueling ground at the same time, that the sparks could not be suppressed and burst forth. Even Swati wouldn't be Diamond's match. None of you have ever fought with him, so you won't understand how powerless you are to be his opponent. Dolong shrugged his shoulders, further emphasizing his position. Sarah's fans, who were less than 2 meters away from his circle, glared at him fiercely. One of the girls, who had black hair and bright eyes, had her hair tied into 2 thick braids that hung down to her chest. She was particularly imposing. Boys always don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Sarah will teach you how to behave. Doran held his head high. My upbringing doesn't allow me to say harsh words, but you have to know that this era is still supported by men. Heidi. That's going to be a thing of the past. Doran. Ridiculous. The two of them stuck to their own words and gradually went off topic. However, the duel on the field would not stop because of them. 30s. The moment the automatic shuffling ended, the countdown for the preparation stage began. The players on both sides had already switched their states and were fully immersed in the duel. Dake quickly took out 5 cards from the top of the deck. Kettle, Trash Slime, Diru Beast, Reveal Powder, Pride Eye. Has the sacrifice for the summoning ritual been formed? Dake quickly estimated the possibility of summoning a Diru Beast in the first round. Then he looked at Kettle. If there was a pot, then there was a pot. If there was no pot, then there was E. Without a doubt, this was the best solution for Dake's deck. As the 30 seconds countdown for the preparation stage reached 0, the table would emit a reminder that the clock had reached 0. Experienced duelists were especially sensitive to this sound. They relied on this sound to instantly confirm the start of each round. 30s, battle stage. The atmosphere on the field suddenly changed. Magic summoning. Dark took out Kettle from his hand and summoned it at an extremely fast speed. It had been less than an hour since the last duel. Most people still had the image of Kettle punching the little rock dragon's head in their minds. At this time, they would no longer underestimate this 0-attack 3-star magic elf card. Right after Dake, Sarah also completed her summoning. What appeared in the blue side's summoning area was a black cat about the size of Kettle. The black cat's ears were huge, and there was not a single strand of hair on its body. There was an indescribable strangeness in its golden eyes. Card name, Sphinx Cat. Type, Elf card. Level, Race, Bird/Beast. Attribute, Dark Magic, 600. Attack, 600. Defense, 600. Ultimate skill, Shadow Stomp. According to legends, the Sphinx Cat was a cat that was reborn from the underworld. Their ugly and almost deformed appearance made the ancient people's evaluation of them untrue. However, as time passed, the rumors turned into legends, and the Sphinx Cat became a symbol of misfortune. In the last century, witches and witches were very fond of the Sphinx Cat. They believed that the Sphinx Cat could attract misfortune and reduce the side effects of prophecies. Sarah's Sphinx Cat was not the result of a gambling card. She also rarely used gambling cards. The Shungmalian Traveler's Street had extremely rare materials that were difficult to buy even in the outside world's black market. Relying on the refining method passed down from the ancient sages, Sarah finally succeeded in refining this 2-star magic elf card after Halloween. Although she was not particularly satisfied with the blue quality, she still liked it very much. Knowledgeable people would not judge things based on appearance. Sphinx Cat was undoubtedly one of Sarah's core battle tactics. However, before this she had never summoned it in public. Because she was facing Dake Dimming, she did not hesitate to use her trump card. Although Kettle Cat was summoned faster than the Sphinx Cat's mobility was much higher than Kettle Cat's. When it landed on the ground, it gathered strength in its 4 limbs and suddenly bounced up. The whole cat turned into a black arrow and rushed into the opponent's field like the wind. Although Dake maintained a trace of vigilance, due to his trust in Kettle Cat, he waited for the cooldown to end and immediately began to summon the Trash Slime. With a 3-star Kettle Cat and a 1-star Trash Slime, as the sacrifice, he could summon a 4-star Diru Beast. As long as the Diru Beast appeared, it would crush the opponent. However, the Black Furless Cat did not attack Kettle Cat. Instead, when Dake successfully summoned the Trash Slime, it stepped on Kettle Cat's shadow. Its golden eyes emitted a bright light. Shadow Stomp, activate. Chapter 167. Huhu's shadow was nailed to the ground all of a sudden. A strange feeling that it had never felt before spread from the shadow to its entire body. Huhu, whose intelligence level had already exceeded 3.0, clearly showed a panicked expression as it struggled with all its might. However, wave-like ripples appeared on the surface of its tentacles. Its entire outline was completely nailed to the ground, and it could not move. I've stepped on it. Sarah, who was on the blue team's platform, could not help but reveal a smile. Anyone who had seen the duel between Dake and Doran would understand the value of this Huhu card. It must have a core position in Dake's deck. Sarah was in the middle of a duel at that time, but after the duel, she obtained the relevant information from her fans. Remember this in 1 second. https://m. But can't you? VIP collecting information on competitors. This was a very natural thing for people whose goal was to win the championship. Sarah had done a very good job of that. After careful analysis, she felt that the value of Huhu was not only limited to its single card strength, but also because it was the only 3-star magic guide spirit that Dake had taken out so far. 3 stars plus 1 star equals 4 stars if she wanted to summon the 4-star magic guide spirit that had appeared previously. Diru Beast? The existence of Huhu was very crucial. In other words, as long as Huhu was completely sealed, more than half of Dake's deck would be crippled. And Sphinx Cat was a magic guide spirit card that was specially used for sealing. Its sure kill skill, Shadow Stomp, could completely nail a magic guide spirit to death. Regardless of whether it was moving, summoning, or even sacrificing, all actions that wanted to change its coordinates would be prohibited. Of course, as a 2-star magic guide spirit card, the flaws of Sphinx Cat were very obvious. When it maintained Shadow Stomp, it had to continuously inject magic power and could not move. The stronger the struggle of the prey that was stepped on, the more magic power it would need to consume. And the magic power of Sphinx Cat was only 600. Therefore, before Sphinx Cat's magic power was exhausted or it was forced to lift its leg, it had to end the battle quickly. Sarah calculated the speed of magic power consumption and judged that she only had less than 2 rounds left. However, duelists were in a race against time. 2 rounds were more than enough. She glanced at the trash slime that Dake had summoned, and she couldn't help but grin. This should be a 1-star magical guide spirit, coupled with a 3-star kettle. Is it trying to quickly summon a 4-star card? As expected, he still hasn't realized that I've locked kettle. Magical summoning. Blue team's summoning area. Another magic guide spirit belonging to Sarah was summoned. She had a well-defined face, a graceful body, and strong limbs. It was a black hound with golden patterns on its body. Card name, Anubis. Type, elf card. Level, 00 race bird. Attribute, dark magic power, 900 attack, 900 defense, 900 ultimate skill, shadow hunt. Similar to the Sphinx, the Anubis was often mistaken for the Grim Reaper's pet due to its elegant posture and habit of lurking in the shadows. But in fact, they were just a dog breed named by humans. They were usually friendly, smart, vigilant, and loyal. They were experts at hunting rabbits. They were loved by both hunters and assassins. Lurking in the shadows, hunting for death. When the aura of death shrouded the trash slime, Dake's sacrificial summoning was already halfway through. With trash slime and kettle as sacrifices, sacrificial summoning. Diru Beast? The trash slime was wriggling on the ground like a puddle of water. Kettle's shadow was stepped on by the Sphinx. The 2 magical guide spirits emitted white light under the sacrificial summoning. Strands of light converged between the 2. The trash slime's body was pulled into threads in an instant. The outline of Kettle's body also showed obvious signs of stretching forward. But the Sphinx's golden eyes suddenly emitted a golden light, suppressing its body that was about to turn into light. This is... Dake's sacrificial summoning came to an abrupt end. His expression changed slightly. He was used to the simple tactics of the little mages. He didn't expect that someone would have the technique to stop the sacrificial summoning. Why did Dake's sacrificial summoning get interrupted? Outside the arena, Doran had originally thought that the Diru Beast would appear again. He had originally looked at Heidi with a mocking expression, but now he couldn't help but cry out in surprise. The thick braid girl crossed her arms and sneered. This is Swati, the pride of our magic academy. Tension and joy. The 2 different atmospheres quickly spread between the 2 academies. This is bad. The first-year students of the Noble Academy could more or less see the crux of this duel. And they couldn't help but worry. Most of the students of the Knight Academy and the Fool Academy were confused. What happened just now? Luoboat asked with a puzzled expression. The changes in the arena were beyond his knowledge. Werther was slightly hesitant as he guessed. Maybe the black cat did something to him? Dake's sacrificial summoning failed. Luoboat had a surprised expression. Sacrificial summoning can be stopped? Then isn't Dake's situation very bad? White's expression was rather grave. It's like this. Not only did he waste the time to cast the sacrificial summoning spell, but the slime didn't look like it could fight against the Swati hound. Once the slime as one of the sacrificial offerings was destroyed, it would be difficult for him to have a second sacrificial opportunity. Luoboat's face paled. So Swati of the Magic Academy is actually this powerful. In reality, Dake's trash slime was even weaker than everyone had imagined. The trash slime with 0 attack and defense only had a sure kill skill. Strengthened stomach acid, which was used to aid digestion. Against the extremely fast vicious hound, the trash slime, which was not much slower than Kettle, didn't have the slightest ability to resist. The Anubis shadow suddenly elongated, and its body suddenly followed the shadow, its sharp claws tearing apart the trash slime's body in an instant. Drip. The start of the second round passed in that instant. Dake suppressed his nervousness and calmly added 2 new magic guide cards from the top of the deck into his hand. In his half, Kettle was controlled, and the trash slime was torn apart. There was no longer any magic guide fairy that could stop the Anubis. The magic guide ball floating in the air was like a young lady exposed in front of a pervert. There was no longer any trace of safety to speak of. Anubis, tear it apart. Saraswati's high-pitched voice rang out. Woof. The Anubis responded to the command and lowered its body as if it was hunting. Its sharp fangs were exposed from its open mouth, and saliva dripped from the corner of its mouth. The moment Shadow Hunt entered cooldown, it exerted strength in its hind legs, moving from stillness to movement, and leaped up. The transmission of muscle power was clearly visible. The Anubis sped past the red magic guide ball, raising its sharp claws and leaving 3 claw marks on the life barrier. The magic guide ball's HP plummeted. 1000-108. Outside the arena, the atmosphere in the noble house was extremely tense. Doran and a few others looked even more nervous than Dake himself. Saraswati had actually forced Dake into a desperate situation with only 2 2-star magic guide fairies. The Anubis's vigorous body landed lightly. Its amber eyes turned to the damaged magic guide ball behind it, and then it slowly turned around. Saraswati still took out 2 new magic guide cards from the top of the deck. However, she did not look at them. Instead, she declared in a high-spirited manner, "It's over, Dimung. Your life is already like a candle in the wind." Just as she finished speaking, the Anubis, who had adjusted its breathing, had already launched a second attack on the red magic guide ball. Swoosh! The magic guide ball suddenly split into 2. The Anubis's leaping body passed through the middle, and suddenly landed on the ground. It suddenly turned around and barked, "Woof! A woo!" Feudal resistance is meaningless, Anubis. Sarah stood on the contestant platform and clearly saw the changes in the field. A cute fox-like fairy suddenly appeared. When the Anubis was about to pounce, it used its hind leg to kick the magic guide ball away. At the same time, it used the force to bounce away, creating the illusion that it had split into 2. The red magic guide ball's HP also dropped to a freezing point under this kick. 10813 Ivan, who had landed again, suddenly growled at the Anubis. Sarah remembered that this petite magic guide fairy should be Dake's fantasy beast. It was a 1-star fairy with 100 magic attack and defense. A mere fantasy beast could not pose a threat to the 2-star Anubis. However, in the previous duel, Dake seemed to have used some kind of magic card to strengthen it. The moment her thoughts turned rapidly, Sarah pulled out a magic guide fairy card from her new hand. The Anubis, on the other hand, received the order and directly pounced on Ivan this time. The red magic guide ball that had flown out bounced up after touching the buffer field at the edge of the field. It gradually lost its momentum and hovered in the air. To Sarah, this was both bad and good news. The bad news was that the Anubis could not jump so high. The Shadow Hunt that allowed it to pounce at high altitudes was still in cooldown. The good news was that the opponent's magic guide fairy could not touch the magic guide ball. The magic guide fairy that she was about to summon was a Bennu bird. It was also her initial magic guide fairy, the fantasy beast. It had a long beak and a grayish-white heron wearing a double-feathered crown. As long as she summoned the fantasy beast, Bennu bird, the situation on the field was no longer important to her. With only 13 magic points left, the barrier of life could not withstand any of the Bennu bird's attacks. Card name, Fantasy Beast Bennu bird. Type fairy card, level, race, undying, attribute, dark, magic power, 100, attack, 100 defense, 100, ultimate skill, soul attraction. Dake's summoning speed was unprecedentedly fast. He felt that he seemed to have broken through some bottlenecks of the 4-second summoning in this pressing battle rhythm. 2 new magic guide cards. One was his initial magic guide fairy, Fantasy Beast, Ibu. The other was Pride 2. Although the magic guide ball's barrier of life was so thin that it could not be seen, the charm of a duel lay in its infinite possibilities. Until the last moment, the outcome was still unknown. He was in a wonderful state. He was nervous but calm. He was calm but excited. The dopamine in his brain was secreting rapidly. No previous duel had given him such a feeling. The summoning of Pride 2 was completed in a very short period of time. Ibu responded to its master's expectations. Bathed in the dark golden light, it was promoted from 1-star to 2-star. Although its 3 attributes were still lower than the Anubis, the gap was very small. Facing the Anubis that was charging at it head-on, it dodged with more nimble movements, and then counterattacked with its claws. It was done in one breath. The difference in the intelligence level of both sides was clearly shown in the close-range confrontation. Ibu's reaction speed and fluidity were higher than the Anubis. The confidence and calmness when it dodged sideways had the bearing of a master. Kettle. Dake's voice was clearly heard. Kettle stopped struggling after being pinned by Shadow Stomp. Its eyes lit up with the brilliance of its superpower. It works. You wouldn't know if you didn't try. The Sphinx's Shadow Stomp couldn't stop this kind of skill from being released. Beep. Suddenly, a clear bird's cry came from the sky. The heron-like Bennu bird was summoned. Dake's heart skipped a beat. But the first to react was Ibu, who was fighting with the Anubis. There was no need for him to give orders. Ibu raised its head high, and its eyes that were full of arrogance were emitting a cold dark golden light. The aura that was at an extremely high place made the Bennu bird in the sky couldn't help but turn its head. Once the two's eyes met, the Bennu bird's heart was overwhelmed by its arrogance, and the great sense of defeat made it lose the desire to attack. The bird was full of dejection. Bennu. Sala's roar unknowingly had a hint of urgency. It was as if from the moment he said that sentence, something had started to go wrong. Suddenly, there was a burst of exclamations outside the field. Sala turned her head and revealed a hint of surprise. It was the Anubis that took advantage of the gap when Ibu raised his head to use circle pupil. It pounced from the side and bit Ibu's neck. But just as she was feeling happy, Sarah discovered, to her astonishment, that Ivan, who had been exchanging blows with the Anubis just a moment ago, had suddenly become extremely tall. It was as if there was still a remnant of the aura when he used circle pupil. No, it was a true suppression of attributes. The Anubis bit Ibu's neck with its sharp teeth, but it was as if it was biting a steel plate. It couldn't bite down no matter what. If it wasn't for Ibu's skin that wasn't hard enough, its teeth might have broken. Ivan allowed the Anubis to bite his neck. He turned his head and looked down, a trace of condescending contempt in his eyes. Squeak squeak. Mongrel. 2-in-1, 4,000 words. You're tuning into the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.